Tioje, God's chosen ones, here's why God is proud of you and lifting you up right now. Chosen one, this isn't just a video, this is a visitation, a holy interruption, a divine reminder. You didn't scroll your way into this moment, you were summoned into it, not by me, not by YouTube's algorithm, but by heaven itself. Your obedience, your patience, your hidden tears, they have reached the ears of God. And now, God is responding, but not with noise, with elevation. You've been through so much, haven't you? There were nights where you cried yourself to sleep, but woke up and smiled for everyone else. Days where the weight of unspoken battles almost crushed your chest. But you still got up, still showed up, still prayed, still believed. The world called it strong, but heaven called it faithful. And God never forgot. This is not a message of hype. It's a spiritual confirmation that heaven has been tracking your journey, not just your results. That even when you felt invisible, you were seen. Even when you felt forgotten, you were held. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, why didn't the pressure kill me? Why didn't the heartbreak harden me? It's because God placed His hand on you, and where His hand rests, nothing can destroy. You weren't just surviving those seasons. You were qualifying for this one. Right now, God is lifting you, not just for what you've achieved, but for how you've endured, for staying soft when life tried to make you bitter, for choosing humility when you had every right to flex, for forgiving when it was easier to curse. That's why this elevation is sacred. It's not about spotlight, it's about stewardship. Could it be that God is lifting you not for your sake, but for everyone connected to your obedience? Before we go any deeper, if your spirit is already stirred, type 777 in the comments. That's not just a number, it's a declaration. It means, I'm ready for what heaven wrote about me. I'm aligned. I say yes. And if you've ever supported this message through super thanks, thank you, truly. Whether you gave or simply listened in silence, you've helped build a space where God's voice echoes louder than the noise of this world. You're part of something prophetic. And here's the final question before we dive in. What if this entire wilderness season was just a setup to prove one thing, that you could be trusted with glory and still give God the credit? Chosen one, lean in. Don't treat this like background noise. This is your burning bush moment. This is God saying, I saw it all, and now I'm lifting you, not because of the applause, but because of your alignment. Let's begin. God's chosen ones, here's why God is proud of you and lifting you up right now. Chapter 1. You obeyed even in the dark. God's chosen one, there is a rare kind of obedience that doesn't shout, it whispers, it doesn't boast, it bleeds. And you, beloved, walked it out with trembling feet and a heart that refused to let go of heaven's hand. You obeyed when the roadmap was blank and the sky offered no signs. You obeyed when silence was louder than prophecy, and every logical voice told you to wait, to pause, to retreat. But what if the silence wasn't abandonment, but God testing the purity of your alignment? Have you ever wondered why some people seem to wait for the perfect plan, while others, like you, step out before the ink is even dry on the promise? Why does God trust you with mystery? Why did He call you to build without a blueprint? Could it be because you were never following a path? You were following a presence. Abraham knew something about that. When God called him to leave his homeland in Genesis 12, there were no coordinates, no destination on a map, just a divine instruction to go to the land I will show you. And Abraham went, not because he understood, but because he trusted the voice that summoned him. You are walking in the same covenant lineage. Like Abraham, your feet moved before your eyes could understand. This is why God is lifting you now. You didn't wait for the applause of men. You didn't demand clarity. You followed the cloud, not the crowd. You are one of the few who didn't need to know how, because you already knew who. That obedience in the dark? It's what separates those who are called from those who are merely curious. How many would have folded in the face of such silence? How many would have turned around when they realized no one was clapping, no one was watching, and no one was coming to explain what's next? You kept going, not because you had no fear, but because your spirit had a compass stronger than fear: faith. When Mary, the mother of Jesus, received the angel's word in Luke 1:38, her entire world flipped upside down. No manual, no comfort, no way to explain it. Yet her response: "Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word." That was obedience in the dark. That was surrender before understanding. And that same seed of faith has bloomed in you. You said yes when no one else could see what you were saying yes to. And when others chose reason, you chose revelation. When they said, "Wait until it makes sense," you said, "I've already heard enough." You weren't obeying a system. You were yielding to a spirit. Dr. Ben Carson, world-renowned neurosurgeon and former U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, once shared how he turned down lucrative offers early in his medical career to work in an under-resourced hospital because he felt God tugging him toward a purpose beyond profit. He said, "God doesn't call you to be comfortable. He calls you to be faithful." That's what you did. You chose the invisible instruction over the visible reward. A woman named Elira. She left her successful marketing career not because she had a backup plan, but because God whispered, "Build something eternal." With no funding, no partner, and no followers, she launched a center for healing trauma survivors. Her family called her foolish. Friends walked away. But years later, lives were being restored, generations were being healed, and the very people who mocked her came to thank her. Elira wasn't chasing clarity. She was chasing obedience. And you've done the same. You've endured long nights of weeping and walked through fog-thick confusion, but you never let go. That alone is why heaven celebrates you. When the world asks, "What's your 5-year plan?" you say, "I move when he speaks." Psalm 119:105 reminds us, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Not a spotlight, but a lamp, just enough light for the next step, not the whole journey. And you kept stepping. How many people long to know what's ahead, but are unwilling to trust the one who sees beyond? How many demand full visibility before they give God their yes? But not you. You've proven that faith is not the absence of fear, it's the presence of obedience in the middle of it. The wind doesn't ask the butterfly to justify why it lifts off the branch, it simply carries it. That's how your obedience worked. You didn't have wings of certainty, you had wings of surrender, and even though you couldn't see the full picture, you trusted the current of the Spirit to carry you. David danced before the ark in 2 Samuel 6 with wild abandon, not because the journey was over, but because he honored God along the way. Your obedience carries the same fragrance. It honors God in the valley, not just on the mountain. The lifting you're experiencing now, it's not random, it's a divine reward. The elevation you feel, it's not a promotion, it's a declaration from heaven. This one obeyed in the dark. This one said yes with no safety net. This one trusted my silence. And now God says, "I will honor what the world ignored." And still, many watched you from afar and thought your steps were planned, your confidence unshaken, your journey predestined with clarity. But what they never saw was the cost behind your calm. They didn't hear the midnight whispers, the groans between prayers, or the hidden war between faith and fear. What looked like courage was often quiet trembling wrapped in surrender. But God knew. He saw it all. And that's why your name is being lifted in rooms where you've never stepped, because faith that survives the dark always finds its voice in the light. Isn't it astonishing how people assume strength by posture, not by process? How many misunderstand your confidence as certainty when deep down it was really conviction fighting for breath? What if the real victory wasn't in arriving at your destination, but in not quitting halfway through your wilderness? What if the crown wasn't handed to the loudest, but to the one who chose silence and still stayed the course? You remained faithful even when the reward felt delayed. You chose obedience when results were invisible. You planted righteousness in secret, and now the soil of your surrender is pushing up a harvest of honor. In the kingdom, faithfulness is never wasted. It is weighed. Every invisible yes became a weighty seed in heaven's garden, and now the fruit is undeniable. Do you remember Joseph? He obeyed when it cost him everything, betrayed by brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison, yet still he remained faithful. Genesis 39:21 says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor." That favor didn't erase the pit, but it elevated him through it. And you, like Joseph, have walked through shadows without losing sight of the promise. And isn't it true? You obeyed when it didn't benefit your image. You kept going when quitting would have been justified. You stayed pure when compromise could have accelerated your breakthrough. And that's why God is exalting you. Not because you earned it, but because you endured what others avoided. Promotion in the kingdom doesn't come from performance, it comes from purity. Catherine Doherty, a Russian-born social activist and founder of the Madonna House Apostolate, once said, "Faithfulness in little things is a big thing." She lived through persecution, exile, and the loss of nearly everything, but never abandoned her calling. Her life proved that heaven honors what the world overlooks, and your journey echoes that same truth. When no one else clapped, heaven recorded. When you whispered yes with tear-stained cheeks, angels stood still. Let me tell you about Jonas, a young violinist who declined a career with one of Europe's finest orchestras because he felt called to teach music in forgotten inner-city neighborhoods. His professors thought he was wasting his talent. Sponsors withdrew. Yet he stayed year after year, training broken children to play their way into healing. 2 decades later, a young girl he mentored performed at Carnegie Hall. Jonas never sought a stage, but now his fruit sings for him. You've also sown when no one watched, loved when it hurt, chose character when shortcuts were available, and heaven has not ignored it. Galatians 6:9 reminds you, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." That due season, it's now, not because of chance, but because of choice. Like the sunflower that turns itself daily toward the light, even on cloudy days, you stayed positioned, even when God's face seemed hidden. You didn't chase the sun, you trusted its return. That's what your obedience looked like. Relentless, rooted, radiant. Your elevation is not a random event, it is divine response. God is lifting you because you proved that you could walk without sight, speak truth without proof, and worship without evidence. You didn't manipulate your moment, you matured into it. And in a world that rewards noise, you chose stillness. In a culture that praises speed, you chose waiting. That's why the lifting of God won't just place you in higher places, it will preserve you in them. What if this is the season where what was done in the shadows begins to shine in the sun? What if this is the moment where obedience becomes legacy? And what if God is not just proud? He is preparing to display you as proof that trusting Him blindly was never in vain. Chosen one, the silence that once surrounded your yes is now turning into sound waves of glory. Your obedience in the dark has broken open a season of divine revelation. And now, heaven is not just watching, heaven is responding. Chapter 2. You held on. When it felt like God went silent. Chosen one, do you realize how rare it is to keep walking when the voice that called you goes quiet? You didn't just pass through storms, you endured them without a weather report. You survived nights that tried to break you, carrying questions heaven seemed unwilling to answer. Have you noticed how silence has a weight heavier than sound? You bore it, not because it was easy, but because something eternal within you refused to let go of God, even when his voice faded into what felt like divine distance. There were seasons when sunrise brought no comfort, when waking up felt like entering another battlefield of the unseen. You weren't just surviving circumstances, you were surviving absence. Can we talk honestly? There were moments your prayers felt like letters returned unopened. You cried out with sincerity, only to be met with echo and stillness. So why did you stay? Why did you keep praying when no angel showed up with answers? Why did you continue worshiping when the heavens stayed closed? Why didn't you walk away like so many others who interpret silence as abandonment? Because you were not clinging to a feeling, you were anchored by a covenant. Job, stripped of everything, children, wealth, health, still declared in Job 13:15, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." That wasn't reckless religion, that was relentless relationship. And you've walked that same path. You stayed not because of blessings, but because you had history with the one who called you by name. You remembered who he was, even when you couldn't feel what he was doing. Can you imagine how much spiritual weight that carries? When heaven seems mute, and yet you still sing. When God doesn't speak, but you refuse to curse him. When your life feels like a hallway of closed doors, but you still hold the key of praise. How many could do that without losing their mind? How many would remain when the miracles feel delayed and the silence screams louder than sermons? You did. And that silence? It wasn't proof that God had abandoned you. It was evidence that your faith was graduating from emotional to eternal. Remember Hannah, barren and broken in 1 Samuel 1, crying out year after year while others mocked her and heaven seemed to withhold. Still she prayed, still she believed. And when her silent season ended, the prophet Samuel was born. Not just a child, but a legacy. That's the kind of fruit God births from those who trust him beyond what they can see. And yes, you saw people you knew were prideful and indifferent walk into doors you fasted for. You watched promotions land on the ungrateful, blessings rain on the unfaithful. Meanwhile, you waited, you worshipped, you wept in the hallway with blistered feet and empty hands. The silence wasn't passive, it was warfare. It attacked your perception, your hope, your identity. It tried to redefine what God said based on what you didn't hear, and yet you endured. That alone is the mark of a warrior. Helen Keller, a blind and deaf American author and lecturer, once said, "Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened." You embody that truth. You held on, not because everything made sense, but because everything in you refused to disconnect from God's heart, even when his hand seemed hidden. Consider Serena, a schoolteacher in Nairobi who lost her child and nearly lost her faith. For 2 years she attended church with dry eyes and a shattered voice, barely able to sing. But every Sunday she stood in the back and whispered one line, "You're still worthy." No visions, no open doors. But 1 year later she started a community home for grieving mothers, and her pain became a refuge for hundreds. Serena didn't serve because it felt good. She served because God was still God. That's the kind of obedience that breaks spiritual glass ceilings. You didn't worship because your prayers were answered. You worshiped because your heart remembered who he was. You weren't motivated by the outcome. You were moved by identity. And isn't that what sets the chosen apart? Anyone can celebrate when the harvest comes. But what about those who praise when the soil is dry? Who lift their hands when the heavens seem locked? Who stay faithful in the middle of unanswered questions? Like ancient redwoods whose roots stretch deep beneath centuries of storms, you stood through season after season, not by strength, but by depth. And now, the heavens that once stayed silent are stirring, not because your voice got louder, but because your endurance shook eternity. You didn't always feel brave, but your quiet consistency was louder than the storms you walked through. You didn't roar like a lion, but you endured like one. Every time you lifted your head when your spirit was bowed under invisible pressure, something eternal moved. Every time you cracked open your Bible with tear-stained hands and trembling hope, heaven leaned in. And when your only prayer was, "God, I don't understand, but I still believe," you weren't just surviving, you were declaring war on every lie that said your faith was in vain. Do you realize what that did in the spirit realm? It announced, "I'm still standing, not because I've seen the promise, but because I've known the promiser." That's not just resilience, that's spiritual royalty. Chosen one, those silent seasons you walked through were never meant to punish you. They were sent to prepare you. What you thought was abandonment was actually alignment. The heavens weren't absent, they were watching. Watching how you responded without applause. Watching how you served without reward. Watching how you stayed rooted without visible fruit. And you passed the test, not because you were flawless, but because you were faithful. What if that's what God was really after? Not your perfection, but your perseverance. Not your performance, but your posture. Could it be that what looked like delay was actually divine development? David spent years in caves and exile after being anointed king. There were no trumpets, no thrones, no validation, just isolation, accusations, and waiting. Yet in Psalm 13:1 he cried, "How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever?" And still he stayed. Still he worshipped. Still he refused to abandon his God. And when the silence lifted, the throne was no longer just a promise. It became destiny fulfilled. And now your moment is approaching, but not because you demanded it, because you were forged for it. God is preparing to reward you, not just for believing, but for remaining, for refusing to become bitter when you could have, for showing up in rooms that didn't see you, for lifting your hands when your heart felt numb, for clinging to his word when it felt like the word was avoiding you. A.W. Tozer, a prophetic preacher and writer of the 20th century, once wrote, "It is doubtful whether God can bless a man greatly until he has hurt him deeply. And though you may not call it hurt, you know the crushing weight of waiting, the ache of spiritual silence. But now the oil from that crushing is about to flow into every area of your life." And this is Armand, a filmmaker who spent 12 years pitching a documentary that no studio would back. He was told repeatedly, too raw, too redemptive, too spiritual. He fasted, prayed, and almost walked away, until a struggling distributor stumbled on his short clips online. Within a year, it aired on international platforms and inspired movements in over 30 nations. Armand's silence didn't produce nothing. It produced roots. And when the moment came, he was ready to carry what he was once denied. And so are you. Have you realized yet? If God had spoken too soon, it might have crushed you. If he had answered too quickly, it could have made you arrogant. If the door had opened before your spirit was ready, you would have mistaken the platform for your identity. But he knew. He waited until you could be trusted, not just with breakthrough, but with broken people, not just with visibility, but with humility, not just with favor, but with depth, like the mountain spring that presses upward through rock and ice before it ever sees daylight. You were purified in pressure. Your strength wasn't built on noise, it was built in the stillness. And now, because you remained when it felt like God vanished, you're about to be revealed in the exact place where you were hidden. Romans 5:4 tells us, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. You weren't just building testimony, you were becoming it. You weren't just enduring for survival, you were becoming someone whose very life is the proof. of God's goodness. You didn't ask for the spotlight, but it's coming. Not because you sought fame, but because your faith made room for it. Doors are about to open, not ones you knocked on, but ones only God had the key to. People will wonder, how did this happen so suddenly? But you'll know it wasn't sudden. It was seeded in silence. You are no longer the same. The valley has become your altar. The silence became your classroom, and the wait became your womb. So now, when God speaks through miracles, through unexpected elevation, through divine favor, you won't be shaken by the noise. You'll carry it with reverence. You'll walk with tears in your eyes, not because it's hard, but because it's holy. The silence you once questioned is now the very stage for your loudest testimony. Chapter 3. You stayed pure when the world pushed perversion. Chosen one, in an age where compromise is packaged as wisdom and impurity is celebrated as liberation, you made a decision few dare to make. You walked the narrow road. The world offered you shortcuts, indulgence, and attention. But instead of loosening your standards, you raised them. While others were numbing their convictions just to feel accepted, you chose consecration over comfort. You didn't bow to culture, you stood for covenant. And how many would have stood where you stood? How many would have turned down invitations that appealed to the flesh but violated the spirit? Could it be that the pressure you felt was not a punishment, but a prophecy in motion? Proof that you were already marked for something higher. Jesus said in Matthew 7:14, "But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." You didn't just find it, you stayed on it. While others chased visibility, you chose purity. While they flirted with what was seductive, you fortified your soul. You didn't let the crowd determine your compass. You let God's voice determine your values. When perversion knocked, you didn't entertain it for curiosity's sake. You slammed the door with resolve. You were laughed at for it, even isolated. Some labeled you too much, too sensitive, too intense. But heaven didn't call you too much, heaven called you set apart. Isn't it remarkable how purity is mocked until people realize it's what they needed all along? Isn't it tragic how the world romanticizes rebellion but leaves hearts empty in the aftermath? You saw through that facade. You didn't just protect your body, you defended your destiny, and that's something few will ever understand. Remember Daniel? A young exile in Babylon, surrounded by a culture obsessed with indulgence, entertainment, and assimilation. Yet Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. Daniel 1:8. That one decision, private, quiet, costly, shifted the course of an empire. He was promoted not because he played along, but because he stood alone. You've been walking in that same spirit. Quiet loyalty, silent resistance, sacred restraint. This purity you've preserved didn't come without pain. You've missed out on circles that others glorified. You've lost relationships that once seemed promising. You've watched others gain opportunities that would have been yours if only you had compromised. But you didn't. You didn't sell your calling for clout. You didn't trade your covenant for convenience. A purity like that isn't passive. It's a battleground. It's warfare of the soul, and you fought valiantly. Think about the late Cardinal Francis Arinze, a revered Nigerian theologian known for his integrity and wisdom. He once said, "A person who knows how to say no in silence is stronger than one who shouts yes in a crowd." That was you. You didn't need to prove your strength with noise. You proved it with restraint. Somewhere in a small city, a woman named Annika worked at a fashion agency known for its scandalous branding. After declining to model in a provocative campaign, she was quietly pushed out. Years later, the same agency reached out to her to lead a modest wear project. After market trends shifted and they saw what she saw all along, she didn't bend to trends. She helped birth one through her integrity. And you? you carried that same weight of obedience, not just in public, but especially in private. You said no when no one was watching. You honored God when it would have been easier to say, just this once. You didn't just avoid sin, you confronted it with sacred defiance, and heaven wrote it all down. Have you noticed how butterflies keep their wings hidden inside the cocoon while the world moves on without them? They're not late, they're in transformation. You've been hidden too, not because you're unworthy, but because you're being formed for flight. And now, what you preserved in silence is about to be unveiled with beauty. Purity was never just about physical boundaries. It was about protecting your oil. It was about maintaining clean rivers in a polluted land. It was about proving that holiness still has power, even in a world that forgets what sacred means. And you've done that. Quietly, repeatedly, righteously. Not for praise, but for purpose. Not for applause, but for alignment. You didn't just avoid darkness, you chose light. And that light is about to shine in places where shadows once ruled. The world often teaches that elevation is earned through visibility, charisma, or talent. But heaven measures differently. God doesn't lift people simply because they're gifted. He lifts those who are guarded. He searches not for dazzling performance, but for unshakable purity. And you, chosen one, have passed that test. You didn't climb with compromise in your pocket. You didn't barter your anointing for attention. You walked clean in a polluted system. The higher the altitude, the thinner the air, and the greater the pressure. If you couldn't stay anchored on the ground, you'd never survive the summit. God didn't delay your promotion to punish you. He delayed it to preserve you. He knew that if he lifted you too soon, the weight would crush what your purity had not yet strengthened. Psalm 24:3-4 asks, "Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart." That's why you're rising now, not because of your performance, but because of your posture. How many would have sold their values for a bigger platform? How many gifted people have fallen because no one taught them that purity is the foundation of power? Talent may open doors, but only purity keeps the doors from destroying you. You chose something rare. You resisted when no one would have blamed you for giving in. And now, the oil you protected in the dark is about to be poured in the open. God needs voices that don't flinch under pressure. Leaders who won't bend when offered wealth, partnerships, or shortcuts. He's looking for those who won't trade reverence for relevance. And you've shown him you can carry glory without bowing to greed. Like Joseph in Pharaoh's palace, you've been tested through seasons of hiddenness, injustice, and temptation. Genesis 39 tells us how Joseph refused Potiphar's wife, not because someone was watching, but because his purity mattered more than his pleasure. And for that, God raised him to second in command over Egypt. Joseph wasn't just gifted, he was trustworthy. And so are you. You've shown that you can be trusted with increase without turning it into idolatry. That's no small thing. In a world addicted to clout, your refusal to worship the spotlight is your greatest qualification. What you protected privately, your soul, your oil, your calling, is now the very thing heaven is about to amplify publicly. Zachary Levi, the actor known for his roles in Shazam and Chuck, once spoke about turning down roles that didn't align with his values. He said, "I'd rather miss out on 1,000,000 opportunities than lose myself for one." That conviction, rare, ridiculed, and costly, is what protects legacy. You've walked in that same conviction, quietly, consistently, with clean hands and a guarded heart. Across the Atlantic, a young chef named Leora trained in some of Paris's finest kitchens. When offered a partnership at a lucrative restaurant chain known for unethical sourcing, she walked away. Instead, she opened a small cafe in Marseille that fed the homeless by day and hosted single mothers for free cooking classes by night. Within 3 years, that cafe became a movement. not because she followed trends, but because she followed truth. And you? Your elevation is coming the same way, not because you were aggressive, but because you were aligned. Not because you shouted, but because you stewarded. What the world saw as delay was actually God safeguarding his investment in you. Purity was never weakness, it was preparation. Like gold purified in fire, you have been refined. And now, God is not just going to open doors, he's going to build platforms you didn't ask for, in rooms you never campaigned to enter. Proverbs 22:11 says, "He who loves purity of heart and has grace on his lips, the king will be his friend." When purity governs your private life, favor follows you into public places. You won't need to chase it. It will find you. How many people settle for applause only to lose their anointing in the process? How many worship the gift, forgetting the giver? But you've stayed grounded. You've remained rooted in truth when everything around you shouted for compromise. The stage God is building for you isn't just about promotion, it's about preservation. He knows you won't worship the blessing. You'll worship the one who gave it. You won't let the lights blind you to the source of your oil. You've already proven you can handle elevation without intoxication. And now heaven is responding, not just with favor, but with fullness, not just with gifts, but with glory, not just with access, but with assignment. God is lifting you because you didn't let the world stain what he made sacred, because you stayed clean when everything tried to contaminate you, because you showed him you could be trusted with something holy. And now he's about to place you where only the pure can stand. Chapter 4. You blessed others when you needed a blessing. Chosen one, let's tell the full truth, not the polished version, but the sacred one. There were nights you were collapsing internally, barely able to hold your soul together, and still, you chose to become someone else's anchor. You gave light while sitting in shadows. You wrapped others in comfort while your own heart was unraveling in silence. What others called kindness, God called warfare. Because you weren't just acting kind, you were resisting collapse. How many understand what it feels like to be the encourager while your own voice is shaking? How many know the ache of giving peace to someone else while your own spirit wrestles with unseen storms? You didn't offer out of overflow. You offered from the little that was left, and that made it holy. There were mornings your body felt heavy, your emotions frayed, your thoughts scattered. And yet you sent that text, you said that prayer, you offered that smile. You stood in rooms where your presence alone was a miracle. People thought you were strong, but God knew you were surrendered. And that is greater. Scripture reminds us in Galatians 6:2, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ." You fulfilled that law quietly, persistently, sacrificially, not because you had to, but because your heart refused to shut down, even when life was trying to suffocate it. That kind of compassion isn't performative, it's prophetic. You didn't just do good deeds. You were sowing in famine. You poured from a place that most people only give from once they've been filled. But you made your pain a bridge. You turned your weariness into water for someone else's drought. There's a woman named Mireille who lived in rural Belgium, surviving cancer treatments while working part-time at a bakery. Most of her energy was gone, but every week she would bake an extra loaf of bread and deliver it to a lonely widower who lived across the field. No cameras, no audience, just quiet compassion in the middle of her own fire. Years later, that widower passed away and left Mireille his entire estate. No one saw it coming, but heaven did. You've lived this truth. You gave comfort when you needed it most. You interceded for others while praying through your own night season. You listened to burdens that mirrored your own, not because it was easy, but because it was right. Jesus, in John 4, met the Samaritan woman at the well and ministered to her while he himself was weary and thirsty from his journey. His physical need didn't stop his spiritual mission, and neither did yours. You modeled him, offering healing while still bleeding, offering peace while still climbing your own mountain. This is what separates kingdom hearts from casual helpers. Anyone can serve when the conditions are convenient, but when your own soul is stretched thin and you still reach outward, that is kingdom character. And you didn't stop, even when no one returned the gesture, even when the people you helped never checked in on you, even when the ones you lifted forgot your name in their breakthrough. You didn't serve for applause. You served from covenant. And every act, every whispered prayer, every unexpected gift, every silent sacrifice was written into the archives of heaven. Hebrews 6:10 declares, God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you have shown him as you have helped his people and continue to help them. You weren't sowing for attention, you were sowing legacy. And legacy takes root in dry ground. Can anyone see the beauty of a tree blooming in a desert? It doesn't have to shout to prove it survived. It simply stands. You were that tree. You blossomed in drought. You remained when others wilted. And because you stayed generous when your life felt empty, heaven has already begun preparing a return you cannot even imagine. You walk in the same spirit seen in humanitarian leader Mother Teresa, who, despite her own documented seasons of spiritual dryness, continued to serve the sick and the dying in the slums of Calcutta. In her private letters, she once confessed, "There is such terrible darkness within me, as if everything was dead." And yet, the world only saw her light. She didn't wait for her soul to feel full. She poured out anyway, just like you did. The seeds you sowed in exhaustion are now beginning to crack open underground. What looked like delay was just divine germination. And soon, the fruit will emerge, not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it. Chosen one, you became a well in a desert while your own soul was parched. You stood in the gap when no one stood for you. You turned your ache into oil and became the balm others didn't know they needed. And here's what must be said plainly, you didn't have to. No one would have blamed you if you pulled back, closed your hands, shut off your heart. You had every right to grow cold, but instead you chose to stay warm in a freezing world. Why didn't you withhold what you needed most? Why did you keep pouring from a cup that felt cracked? Could it be that your identity as a vessel was more powerful than your fear of being empty? When others became hardened by heartbreak, you became holy through it. When they chose distance, you leaned in. When offense was justified, you chose grace. That's why your harvest is different. That's why this next blessing won't just look big. It will feel weighty because it's not a transaction, it's a divine return. Proverbs 11:25 tells us, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." That's not poetic, it's prophetic. You refresh people in drought, and now heaven is opening rivers for you. The refreshing coming to your life isn't random, it's righteous compensation. This is the season where the ones who used you as a lifeline are about to watch God become yours. The ones who thought your love made you small are about to realize it made you unstoppable. God isn't just restoring you, He's rewarding you. And not just for what you gave, but for how you gave, without conditions, without needing to be seen, without holding scorecards. It's why your life is about to shift in ways that leave people stunned. Those who once leaned on you will now witness you standing on favor. Those who thought your compassion made you expendable are about to discover your heart was heaven's investment. Luke 6:38 says, "Give, and it will be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over." That's not a metaphor in your case, it's your reality being fulfilled. What you sowed when you were tired is returning as strength. What you gave while grieving is coming back as joy. What you spoke into others is now echoing through your own story. You didn't perform, you embodied. You didn't give for credit, you gave from covenant. And that kind of giving doesn't evaporate, it circulates. You became the rain while your own skies were grey. And now, you're about to walk into a season where the rain returns, abundantly, suddenly, supernaturally. During the civil rights movement, Fannie Lou Hamer, an American voting rights activist and spiritual leader, often fed, clothed and sheltered others in her community, even when her own cupboards were bare. She once said, "Nobody's free until everybody's free." Her giving wasn't conditional, it was generational. Her sacrifices weren't seasonal. They became a seedbed for national transformation. You've walked in that same sacrificial rhythm. And now, transformation is finding you. In São Paulo, a young security guard named Elias worked overnight shifts and spent his lunch breaks tutoring neighborhood kids under a bus shelter. Years later, one of those kids, now a lawyer, nominated him for a national award. Elias didn't give for recognition, but honor found him because humility doesn't go unnoticed by heaven. And you too are about to experience this truth. Your name has been whispered in rooms you didn't know existed. Because generosity creates access, integrity creates elevation, and compassion creates platforms that cannot be purchased. You carried the same spirit as the widow in 1 Kings 17, who, during a famine, gave the last of her flour and oil to the prophet Elijah. She could have withheld it to preserve herself and her son. Instead, she gave, and that act of faith unlocked a miracle of endless provision. Her jar never ran dry. That's what happens when you give what little you have in obedience. And like her, your obedience didn't go unnoticed. Heaven remembers who gave, while hungry. Have you ever seen a tree whose roots reach underground rivers, even when the surface is bone dry? That's who you became. Your roots were deeper than your season. You drew from the Spirit when life gave you nothing. And because of that, you're not just walking into blessing, you're becoming the embodiment of it. People won't just see your elevation, they'll feel it. They'll sit in your presence and feel peace return. They'll hear your voice and healing will stir. They'll encounter you and say, "I don't know what it is," but something changed when they walked in. That's because you're no longer just showing up as a person, you're showing up as an answer, as a breaker of cycles, as a heaven-sent vessel, overflowing because you gave while empty. And now God says, because you didn't withhold your oil, I won't withhold my outpouring. Chapter 5. You didn't bend to fit in, you stood to stand out. Chosen one, there's something sacred about being the one who never quite fit the mold. While others adjusted their flame to blend in with the room, you kept burning, even if it meant burning alone. From the start, your wiring was different. You didn't carry a crowd mentality, you carried a kingdom mantle. And no matter how hard you tried to shrink, silence, or soften your presence, your calling refused to be camouflaged. You tried, didn't you? Tried to dim your discernment just to keep the peace. Tried to dial down your joy so others wouldn't feel exposed. You toned down your light, hoping they'd stop calling you too much. But light, by nature, interrupts darkness. And every time you tried to disappear into the background, your anointing kept pulling you to the front. Have you ever asked why you couldn't stay hidden for long? Why the very rooms that tried to ignore you couldn't help but notice you? Why people were both drawn to your presence and unsettled by your clarity? Could it be because you were never assigned to fit in, you were born to disrupt? You didn't survive rejection because it was easy. You survived because your spirit remembered that standing apart is the birthplace of true leadership. Jesus said in Matthew 5:14, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." You were never designed to disappear. You were designed to disturb what's stagnant, even when loneliness crept in like fog, even when the silence screamed louder than support. Even when you cried out, "Lord, why do I always feel different?" You still refused to trade identity for imitation. You didn't bend your integrity to match the temperature of the room. You carried fire where others settled for flickers. The prophet Jeremiah understood this burden. In Jeremiah 1, he was called as a prophet to the nations from his youth. When he protested, saying he was too young, God replied, "Do not say, 'I am only a youth.' For to all to whom I send you, you shall go, and whatever I command you, you shall speak." Jeremiah was mocked, misunderstood, and isolated. But he didn't mute his message to gain popularity, and neither did you. You were rejected, not because you lacked value, but because your value couldn't be controlled. You were labeled too spiritual, not because you were off, but because your purity exposed their compromise. Some said you were intense, but in truth your passion was prophetic, and your consistency was convicting. Cardinal Robert Sarah, a Guinean Catholic leader and author, once said, "It is better to be persecuted for telling the truth than to be praised for living a lie." That conviction cost him influence in political circles, but elevated him as a voice of purity and power in the church. You've carried that same unwavering stance, and like him, you didn't dilute yourself to win temporary applause. You preserved your identity for eternal assignment. In the city of Wellington, a young entrepreneur named Callan was repeatedly advised to play the game to gain investor favor, tone down his ethical code, adjust his language, keep his values quiet. But he couldn't. Instead, he built his startup from the ground up without compromising once. Years later, the very firms that rejected him came back, asking to buy in, not just to the company, but to the integrity behind it. You've been through that same tension, the pressure to comply, to appease, to adapt, and yet you didn't conform. You carried conviction into places where neutrality was more convenient. You chose authenticity over acceptance. Even in nature, there's a tree called the baobab. Its shape is so unusual that it stands out against any landscape. Some cultures even called it the upside-down tree, but beneath its odd form is its strength. The baobab stores water inside its massive trunk, surviving droughts while others wither. That's who you've been, misunderstood in form, unmatched in depth. You didn't let their mockery change your message. You didn't let the loneliness compromise your loyalty. You stood when shrinking would have been easier. You showed up as you, not a version of what they wanted. And heaven took note, because what makes you different is what makes you dangerous to the enemy. You're not a chameleon blending with your surroundings. You're a flame, untamed, unfiltered, and impossible to put out. Let's not sugarcoat it. This journey of standing apart has cost you deeply. It didn't just stretch your spirit, it stripped your social circle. You lost invitations, opportunities, and people you once thought were covenant connections. It hurt, but you made the kind of decision that heaven records. I'd rather lose comfort than lose my calling. I'd rather lose the world than lose myself. And how many can say the same? You didn't chase platforms, you chased presence. You weren't counting followers, you were tracking faithfulness. You didn't dilute the oil to make it easier to carry, you chose to carry it pure. That kind of clarity doesn't come cheap. It costs something. And yet, you paid the price. How many would have compromised just to keep their seat at the table? How many would have softened their voice just to stay included? But you stood, even when it meant walking alone, even when the silence echoed louder than applause. You stood. Isaiah 57 declares, "Because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. Therefore I have set my face like flint, and I know I will not be put to shame." You lived that verse. Your resolve became your resistance. Your immovability became your intercession. God saw it all. Every time you declined what looked like a blessing but felt like a trap. Every time you said no, even when your emotions said yes. Every time you cried because being set apart also meant being left out. Still, you refused to bend your spirit to fit someone else's comfort. You didn't shrink your mantle to be more manageable. You didn't silence your voice to blend into atmospheres you were designed to shift. You didn't wrap your anointing in a costume of conformity. You walked in truth, even when truth was costly. And now, God is getting ready to magnify the very identity they asked you to erase. The boldness they mocked will be the authority He uses. The purity they didn't understand is the oil that will break chains. The calling they questioned will be the doorway through which nations are touched. Consider the story of Queen Esther in Esther 4. She had the palace, the safety, and the option to blend in. But Mordecai reminded her, "Who knows but that you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" She risked her life by refusing to stay silent. And because she stood out, she saved an entire generation. You've carried that same posture, not seeking thrones but stewarding purpose. You've also walked in the quiet bravery of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German pastor and theologian who opposed the Nazi regime. When many church leaders remained silent, he refused to bend. His resistance cost him his freedom, and ultimately his life, but his legacy lives as one of unshakable courage. He once said, "Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." You've spoken through your stance. You've acted through your obedience. And now the heaven you pleased in private is about to reward you in public. There's a woman named Raina, a choreographer, who declined a lucrative partnership with a global brand because they demanded she change her image and compromise her message. Instead, she opened a small studio that trained at-risk teens. Within 5 years, her work caught global attention, not because she changed to fit the world, but because she stayed true. The world ended up adjusting to her. That's your story too. Like the alpine larch, a rare tree that grows at impossible altitudes, you've remained rooted where others can't survive. It bends but never breaks. It stands out in snow-covered mountains where few dare to grow. You weren't built for the valley. Your roots were designed for elevation, and now the summit is calling your name. You're not rising because you adapted. You're rising because you aligned. You're not being elevated because you echoed trends. You're being trusted because you embodied truth. Have you ever considered that your difference wasn't your problem? It was your preparation, that the loneliness was refining you, that the rejection was redirecting you, and now every no from man is becoming a resounding yes from God. You're not just stepping into a higher place, you're stepping into your original design. You weren't called to echo culture, you were born to shift it. You were never meant to mirror trends, you were meant to model truth. So walk boldly, walk fully, walk without apology. This next elevation isn't coming through imitation, it's coming through your authenticity. Because heaven doesn't anoint masks, heaven anoints the real. Chapter 6. You kept the faith, when the facts looked opposite. Chosen one, let's name it for what it was. Your faith didn't survive the storm, it defied it. You stood in situations that looked final, surrounded by facts that should have broken you. The diagnosis, the delay, the denial, they didn't just challenge your hope, they mocked it. Everything logical told you to let go, and still, you held on. Can we be honest? Most people would have folded. Most would have agreed with the numbers, the statistics, the realistic voices, but not you. You stared at impossibility and refused to surrender. You didn't just believe God could, you believed God still would. Even when there was no visible evidence, even when the report said otherwise. How many would have lost their grip when the bank account screamed lack? How many would have given up on healing when the doctors offered no solution? And yet, you said, I know the facts, but I trust the truth. Could it be that your greatest act of warfare wasn't shouting in prayer, but standing in quiet, immovable belief? Romans 4:18 says of Abraham, "Against all hope, Abraham in hope believed." That's not poetic, it's prophetic. Abraham looked at a barren womb, an aging body, and a timeline that mocked his promise. But he didn't walk by sight, he walked by covenant. So did you. Your bank account said empty, but your declaration was, "My God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills." Your medical file said chronic, but your spirit whispered, "By his stripes I am healed." That wasn't denial. That was faith sharpened in fire. When others bowed to circumstance, you rose in belief. And that belief, it shook the unseen. Your faith wasn't built on evidence, it was built on essence. You didn't cling to what was happening, you clung to who God was, even when it made no logical sense. When others said, "Move on," you stood still. When reality mocked your prophecy, you guarded it like treasure. You carried the same spirit as the woman in 2 Kings 4, whose son died in her arms. Her heart was breaking, but when asked if all was well, she replied, "It is well." Not because it looked well, but because she believed in the one who could raise the dead. Her faith triggered a miracle. So has yours. George Muller, the 19th century evangelist known for caring for thousands of orphans, never once asked for donations. He simply prayed, and provision came. He said, "Faith does not operate in the realm of the possible. There is no glory for God in that which is humanly possible." His life was a series of facts defied by unwavering trust. You've lived that same legacy of quiet confidence. In a coastal town in the Philippines, a young fisherman named Paulo lost his entire fleet during a typhoon. With no insurance and little hope, the facts said it was over. But every morning, Paulo rowed his small canoe to the sea and declared, "Provision is coming." Within a year, a stranger sponsored new boats for his entire crew after hearing his story of daily faith. Paulo didn't just rebuild a business, he revived an entire village's hope. And you've done the same. While the world stared at data, you stared at destiny. You didn't pretend the facts didn't exist. You just refused to worship them. Have you noticed how the eagle flies above the storm? While other birds seek shelter, the eagle rises above the clouds. It doesn't wait for the storm to stop. It uses the pressure to soar. That's what your faith has done. You didn't run from adversity. You used it to climb. That's why the enemy hates your faith, because facts can shift, reports can change, numbers can be manipulated, but anchored faith, that terrifies the darkness, because it can't be reasoned with. It's not powered by sight, it's powered by knowing. You knew the character of the one who called you. You remembered the voice that promised, even when nothing around you confirmed it. You believed, not because of what you saw, but because of what he said. And that faith, it didn't just survive, it qualified you for what comes next. Chosen one, you didn't just believe in God, you believed God himself. That's deeper, that's different. One is belief in his existence, the other is trust in his integrity, and you chose the second, even when it defied logic, timelines, and tangible results. Some people wait until everything lines up before they lift their hands, but you praised in the middle of the unknown. Some only trust when things are under control, but you trusted when your world was unraveling. You didn't just quote scriptures, you embodied them. You walked like the promise was already yours, even when there was no trace of it in sight. What makes someone praise before the breakthrough even begins? What kind of faith sings in drought, dances in disappointment, and smiles through delay? Could it be that your soul knew what your eyes couldn't see? That heaven had already said, yes? Every time the enemy threw facts at you, you countered with, "It is written." You fought not with emotion, but with evidence from eternity. When the doctor said decline, you whispered Psalm 103, verse 3. He heals all my diseases. When the waiting became unbearable, you leaned into Isaiah 40:31. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. You didn't let earthly reports override heavenly authority. You didn't fold when feelings contradicted your faith, and because of that, your words carried weight in the spirit realm. Do you know what was really happening while you spoke faith into your valley? Angels were being dispatched. Principalities were being displaced. Portals were opening, because true faith doesn't just survive a storm. It shakes the unseen into alignment. Your declarations weren't just hopeful. They were heaven-authorized strategies that opened doors no man could shut. This wasn't blind optimism. It was divine confidence. You moved like the miracle was already signed, because in the courts of heaven it was. And your posture, it didn't just reflect hope, it triggered release. You walked in the same dimension of faith as the centurion in Matthew 8, who told Jesus, "Just say the word, and my servant will be healed." He didn't need to see proof. He didn't need Jesus to come physically. He just needed a word. That level of faith astonished even Christ. And you've walked in that same invisible boldness, trusting the voice, not the visibility. Sojourner. Truth, the African-American abolitionist and preacher, once stood in front of a mocking crowd and said, "Truth is powerful and it prevails." She preached liberty while still feeling the weight of oppression. She walked in boldness without ever seeing full societal justice in her lifetime. But her faith, it outlived her. That's the kind of legacy you're sowing with every declaration, every unwavering step. In a small town in Morocco, a woman named Layla ran a struggling family bakery. Year after year, sales dwindled, but every morning she laid hands on her oven and declared, "This oven will not go cold. My hands are blessed." Her neighbors mocked her, but within months, a viral social media post featuring her traditional pastries drew thousands of orders and partnerships across borders. Layla didn't wait to see proof. She moved as if it was already done, and heaven responded. You've done the same. Your faith didn't simply endure a test, it transformed it. You didn't sit and wait for results. You lived as though the answer had already come, and in the spirit, it had. What if the real shift didn't begin when the breakthrough showed up, but when you started walking like it already had? What if heaven started moving, not when the door opened, but when you turned the handle with no evidence, it was unlocked? That's what you did. You activated movement through belief. You lived the invisible as if it were visible. You claimed the word as your reality. And now, that reality is becoming flesh. The bamboo tree spends years growing underground before it ever appears above the surface. It looks like nothing is happening, but all the while it's building a root system deep and wide enough to sustain explosive growth. Then, suddenly, in a matter of weeks, it shoots up feet into the air. That's what your faith has been doing, developing unseen infrastructure. And now, the sudden growth is about to begin. Chosen one, you didn't just hope, you believed. You didn't just wait, you walked. And now God is bringing visible manifestation to the invisible movement you made in faith. You're not just stepping into answered prayer. You're stepping into heaven's response to your trust. Chapter 7. You stayed humble when you could have flexed. Chosen one, you had every reason to defend yourself. The receipts were there. The truth was on your side. The people who slandered you were clearly in the wrong. And yet, you stayed still. You could have exposed their deception, dismantled their narrative, turned the tables with a few well-placed words. But instead, you chose silence. Not because you lacked evidence, but because you possessed restraint. How many would have kept quiet when false accusations flew like arrows? How many could have walked away from an open platform to retaliate, but didn't? Could it be that your greatest display of power was in the moment you refused to use it? You didn't clap back. You didn't join the war of whispers. You refused to be baited into foolish fights. Even when dishonor tried to stain your name, you stood tall in dignity. Even when they cut you out of rooms you helped build, you let God be your witness. That wasn't cowardice. That was wisdom rooted in kingdom clarity. Proverbs 17:27 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered." You walked that truth with every silent reply. Your humility wasn't weakness. It was warfare done wisely. You could have flexed, pointed to the evidence, listed the wins, exposed the lies, but you didn't. You chose the low road, the one Jesus walked. And when the tables began to turn, you didn't gloat. You didn't strut. You didn't weaponize your victories to shame your enemies. Instead, you glorified the one who vindicated you in silence. Jesus himself stood in front of Pilate in Matthew 27, falsely accused by religious leaders, surrounded by a mob. And yet, he answered nothing. He didn't need to justify his authority. He embodied it. You've walked in that same posture, not just believing in God's justice, but choosing to wait on it. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years of imprisonment, emerged without vengeance. He said, "Resentment is like drinking poison, and then hoping it will kill your enemies." He led with dignity when he could have led with revenge. And because of that, history honored him. You've carried that same spirit. The restraint you showed wasn't silence, it was strategy. In a quiet village in Croatia, a young architect named Emil was removed from a community project he designed. Another took credit. Rather than retaliate, he blessed the effort and walked away. Years later, when that project failed due to poor planning, the community came back and asked Emil to rebuild. This time not just as architect, but as a city advisor. Emil didn't push himself forward. His humility pulled favor toward him. You've done the same. You didn't chase the spotlight. You stayed behind the curtain, waiting for God's signal. And when elevation began, you didn't use it to prove people wrong. You used it to point people to God. Have you ever seen how the valley absorbs more rain than the mountaintop? It seems lower, but it receives more. That's what humility looks like in the spirit. It may seem like the low place, but it holds more favor, more grace, more outpouring than pride ever could. And you, chosen one, have positioned yourself under heaven's reign. You didn't announce your breakthrough, you let your fruit speak for itself. You didn't shout when vindicated, you let peace be your response. That's why your voice carries authority now, because it was forged in silence, because it was seasoned with surrender. You weren't after revenge, you were after reverence. You didn't seek claps, you sought alignment, and God has recorded every moment where you could have flexed but chose to bow. That's why this next season of elevation is different. It's not the product of branding, influence, or self-promotion. It's not manufactured, it's mandated. This isn't something you chased, it's something that's chasing you, because your humility was seen, measured, and confirmed in heaven's courts. Isn't it wild how the world teaches you to announce every win, but the kingdom honors those who win in silence? While others curated highlight reels, you cultivated holiness. While some pushed to be seen, you pulled back to stay sanctified. And in that hidden space, your roots went deep enough to hold up the weight that's now coming. Your rise is irreversible because your foundation was forged in restraint. You didn't cheat the process. You didn't manipulate doors. You didn't beg for validation. You let time, truth, and God's hand speak for you. James 4:10 says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up." You didn't have to campaign for your seat. Heaven already had one carved in your name. You didn't shout your own credentials. You just kept serving. And now, your service has become a platform. This elevation isn't sudden, it's sovereign. It's not based on your performance. it's based on your posture. How many people can rise and still remain grounded? How many can hold power without being possessed by it? What if your low place was not punishment, but protection, preparing you to carry the glory without cracking? You've shown God something rare, that you can be favored without becoming arrogant, that you can be affirmed without needing to be applauded, that you can receive honor and return it upward. In Luke 14:11, Jesus declared, "For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." That's not a suggestion, it's a law. You obeyed that law. And now, the throne you didn't chase is being prepared before your enemies. You're walking in the same divine pattern as Mordecai in the book of Esther. He exposed a plot, saved the king's life, and returned to the palace gates, uncelebrated, unrewarded. But in due time, the king remembered. Mordecai was honored with a royal robe and paraded through the city by the very man who tried to destroy him, not because he demanded it, but because he waited. Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers, was once mocked for his quiet and gentle style in children's television. Yet his unwavering kindness and moral depth changed generations. When asked how he remained so humble despite national fame, he said, "Deep and simple is far more essential than shallow and complex." He never sought stardom, he sought to serve. And in return, the world honored him, just like you, chosen one. In a rural town in Colombia, a woman named Lucia worked for decades as a janitor in a local school. Unknown to anyone, she secretly paid for students' uniforms and lunches out of her modest wages. Years later, during a national education reform, a former student, now a senator, publicly honored her before Parliament, establishing a scholarship fund in her name. Lucia never asked for recognition. Her humility drew it to her. That's what God is doing for you. Because you didn't boast, He's about to broadcast. Because you didn't elevate yourself, He's about to showcase you. Not to glorify you, but to magnify His character through your journey. Have you noticed how the sunflower doesn't chase the sun? It simply turns toward it, and yet, because of that alignment, it grows taller than most flowers in the field. That's you. You didn't run after the spotlight. You simply turned your face toward heaven. And now, growth is inevitable. This elevation will not corrupt you. It will confirm you. It won't change your heart. It will expose your consistency. And the best part, you'll still kneel like you did in the wilderness. You'll still pray like you did in the quiet place. Because you don't worship the platform, you worship the presence. Chosen one, you didn't beg for a table. You were becoming the kind of vessel God could trust to sit at one without flipping it over in pride. And now, the seat is being pulled out. The honor is on the way. Not because you sought it, but because you sowed it. Chosen one, after everything you've walked through, after the valleys, the silence, the resistance, the rejection, the testing, and the loneliness, heaven has made one thing clear. God is proud of you, not just for the outcome, but for the obedience. Not just for what you achieved, but for how you endured, for how you believed without seeing, for how you loved when you were empty, for how you stood when no one clapped, for how you chose the narrow road when the wide one was easier. You didn't fold, you didn't compromise, you didn't quit. And now, heaven is not only watching, heaven is responding. You are stepping into a divine reward, not because you were perfect, but because you were faithful. This message was never about hype. It was about alignment. It was never about manipulation. It was about reminding you of who you are and why heaven is moving on your behalf right now. And if this word stirred your spirit, if it reminded you of your journey, if it confirmed what God's been whispering to you in secret, then please, like this video to help spread the word to other chosen ones. Share it with someone who's walking through a silent season. Comment below what part spoke to your spirit the loudest. Subscribe so you don't miss any future prophetic encouragements. And to those of you who supported this channel through a super thanks or simply by watching, commenting or praying, thank you. Whether you gave financially or gave your time, your support is deeply appreciated. Every seed you sow, even in silence, is seen in heaven. Now, I speak this blessing over you. May the God who sees in secret reward you openly. May every hidden tear become a visible testimony. May the tables turn in your favor, and may the doors that no man could open swing wide for you. May your name be spoken in rooms your feet haven't entered yet, and may the peace of God guard your heart as you rise. You are chosen, you are called, you are being lifted, and heaven is proud. Until next time, stay aligned, stay faithful, and stay anchored in truth. Shalom and favor be upon you, always. Amen. Chosen one. Peace and provision are about to collide. Can you feel it? This didn't find you by mistake. This moment was scheduled in the heavens long before you even pressed play. You've been faithfully walking through a season where the weight felt heavier than your own strength. Emotionally dry, spiritually stretched, and yet still showing up with unwavering faith. But now, something rare is unfolding, something sacred. Heaven has whispered your name into a shift that can no longer be delayed. You're not just being sustained, you're about to be saturated. Have you ever wondered why it felt like God was silent while you were carrying so much? Because sometimes the silence means the delivery is too large to arrive in pieces. And now, everything is coming all at once. This is not just a new chapter. This is a divine intersection, a convergence of blessings that don't usually arrive together. Peace that calms your inner storm, and provision that fills every empty vessel. Not one after the other, but both at the same time. Imagine your soul finally catching its breath as your hands overflow with what you once prayed for through tears. This is that moment, and you're being invited into it by name. Let me ask you this. What if you weren't being punished all that time? What if you were being positioned for something that only the truly chosen ever get to experience? Not everyone will understand this kind of blessing, because this isn't just about getting a breakthrough. This is about stepping into divine balance, a place where your past doesn't chase you and your future flows with supernatural ease. You've been walking in faith without the fruit, but now the fruit is catching up, quickly, suddenly, like the rain that returns to cracked ground and makes it bloom overnight. And yes, you've felt weary. You've questioned your timing. You've asked God, why does it seem like others receive so easily while I carry so heavily? Could it be because what's coming to you requires a foundation only forged through fire? If your spirit is stirring right now, type 777 in the comments below. That number isn't random. It's a prophetic agreement, a heavenly code that says, I'm in alignment, I'm positioned, I'm ready. When you write it, you're not just responding, you're declaring, and that declaration releases momentum in the spirit realm. To those of you who've supported this ministry through super thanks, I speak this blessing over you. May your seed return in multiplied harvests. You're not just giving, you're building a prophetic well that others are now drinking from. And heaven sees it. Thank you deeply. What if the very message you're listening to now is the moment everything changes? What if this isn't just confirmation? It's activation. Chosen one, you've reached the threshold, a place where the voice of God is about to answer the silence with both stillness and supply. And not everyone will stay long enough to hear the full unfolding. Only those who've been marked, those who've endured, those who understand what it means to wait when no one claps and to walk when no one notices. So here's the final question. Are you ready for peace, that surpasses understanding and provision that exceeds expectation to hit you at the same time, then stay with me, because in these next 7 prophetic chapters, you're going to receive more than revelation. You're going to receive release, restoration, and clarity. Let's begin. God's chosen ones, peace and provision will hit you all at once. Get ready. Chapter 1. You've known war. Now you'll know peace. You, God's chosen one, haven't you known enough of war? Not merely the kind that rages with visible weapons, but the war that gnaws at your very soul, the war waged in silence, in dark nights and anxious mornings. For far too long, your spirit has battled not just against people, but against invisible pressures that wear down the will. Not only against difficult situations, but against demonic cycles that repeated like storms you were never allowed to outrun. How many times did you have to be the warrior while quietly wishing to be the one protected? Why did your victories always seem to come with a scar? Why did every smile you gave cost you another piece of your strength? There wasn't a single blessing you received that didn't come wrapped in warfare. You didn't inherit ease, you inherited endurance. While others walked into open doors, you were the one on your knees in front of locked ones, sobbing prayers through the cracks. While others were comforted, you were chosen to comfort while your own chest ached with unspoken grief. While others were given applause, you were given assignments, divine ones, heavy ones, silent ones. But still, you wrestled, just as Jacob wrestled the angel at Peniel, refusing to let go until he was blessed. Genesis 32:26. Haven't you done the same? Clinging in the night while everything inside you said to let go, crying out for change while God seemed silent, and yet somehow the silence became sacred. Have you ever wondered why you could forgive those who pierced you without ever receiving an apology? Why you poured into others when no one was pouring into you? Why you rose again even when everything in you screamed to stay down? Could it be that you were carrying something ancient, something eternal? You were molded in the secret, like David, anointed in obscurity long before you were ever acknowledged in public. And like David, your hands have known both the harp and the sword. You were made to war in worship and win in silence. The spiritual fatigue you feel isn't weakness. It's residue from the weight you've carried. Your spirit isn't failing. It's waiting for the exhale. Haven't you noticed how you've sat in rooms filled with people who never once saw the hemorrhage behind your hello? How you cracked jokes with a smile while your heart trembled beneath the laughter? You've kept it all together while everything within you begged to fall apart. And no one gave you credit for the war behind your composure. And yet something is shifting. Heaven is now issuing a different sound, one not of warfare but of rest. The battlefield is being cleared. The spiritual alarms are silencing. The divine pronouncement has been made. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. John 14:27 NIV. Can you feel it? The resistance that used to meet you every morning is losing its grip. The cycles that once repeated with precision are now disrupted. The fog that clouded your prayers is evaporating. Why? Because God has declared the end of the war over your peace. Just as Jesus stilled the storm with a single command, "Peace, be still," Mark 4:39, so too is he silencing the chaos in your soul. What would it look like if peace hit you just as suddenly as war once did? If provision flooded in like the very battles you once had to endure? Are you prepared to receive joy that doesn't come with pain, favor that doesn't require a fight? Visualize the swell of the ocean right before it crashes onto the shore. That's what's building in the Spirit over your life right now. A divine collision of calm and abundance is rising, not trickling in slowly, but flooding in all at once. Consider the journey of Dr. Edith Eger, a Holocaust survivor and world-renowned psychologist. She once said, "Your pain is not your identity. Your trauma is not your destiny." For years, her life was defined by survival. But peace came suddenly, through unexpected healing, through purpose that eclipsed pain. Isn't your story bearing that same shift? And somewhere in a quiet corner of Georgia, a young woman named Kendra stood on her porch at 4:12 a.m., exhausted from another sleepless night of tears. But in that moment, a warm breeze brushed against her skin, and she felt a peace so heavy it made her knees buckle. She had lost her job, her fiancé, and nearly her faith. But something had shifted. Provision came in the form of a stranger who paid her rent. Peace arrived in a dream that confirmed everything she feared was over, was actually about to begin. Isn't it time you believed that the same could be happening for you? Look to nature. The eagle doesn't flap its wings in panic. It locks into the thermal current and rises higher by doing less. This, chosen one, is your thermal wind. You're about to soar, not by striving, but by surrendering to what God is sending. This peace entering your life is not a fragile truce that shatters at the sound of difficulty. It's not the kind of comfort that leaves you when the winds rise again. This is divine peace, the kind forged in the fires you survived. It is unshakable, supernatural, and anchored in the presence of God Himself. Can you sense it beginning to steady your thoughts, rewire your emotions, and hush that relentless voice that's always questioned whether you're enough? This peace isn't asking for permission to stay. It's been commanded to guard you. Paul wrote, "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Philippians 4:7. You're not just being comforted, you're being covered. This peace is not decorative, it's defensive. It wraps around your soul like armor, shielding you from battles that once broke you open. How would your life change if you no longer had to fight just to feel safe? If you didn't have to defend your compassion as though it were a liability? What would it feel like to embrace joy without waiting for something to steal it? That time is here. You will no longer brace yourself every morning as though danger is your portion. You won't have to explain why you smile with caution or why your laughter always carries the weight of memory. God is severing the emotional traps that used to keep you stuck in survival mode. He's destroying the hidden triggers that made your joy feel dangerous. The storm clouds that once hovered are dissipating, and not because of anything you did, but because of everything He declared. Just as Elisha prayed and God opened the servant's eyes to see angelic armies surrounding them, 2 Kings 6:17, your eyes are being opened to the truth. You've never been unguarded. Heaven has always been closer than the chaos. The ground beneath you is undergoing divine transformation. Where once there was friction, there is now favor. Where there was resistance, there is now a quiet rebuilding. You're not being left alone. You're being led into peace so deep it will feel almost foreign at first. But don't fear it. Don't rush back to the war zone you've outgrown. Do you remember the story of Hannah, who wept bitterly in the temple, her voice trembling as she pleaded with God for a child? 1 Samuel 1:10-11. For years, she had been tormented by barrenness and ridicule. Yet, after one divine encounter, her peace came before her provision. Her face was no longer downcast. 1 Samuel 1:18. That's what's coming to you, peace that arrives before the blessing, because sometimes peace is the beginning of the blessing. You may not have all the answers yet, but something deep within you is stabilizing. Your spirit is recognizing the shift. There's a stillness forming in your mind that's louder than fear, a holy rhythm returning to your heart that beats with hope instead of panic. And your soul, oh, your beautiful battle-worn soul, is stepping into a sanctuary that wasn't built by human hands. Have you noticed how sunsets don't rush to end the day? They take their time. They ease the world into rest. That's what God is doing with you. Not an abrupt shift, but a holy winding down of the war that once ruled you. The world-renowned artist Makoto Fujimura, known for his faith-infused abstract paintings, once said, "To slow down is to begin to see. To see is to begin to rest." In a world addicted to speed and struggle, you are now being granted permission to slow down and finally see. And in a quiet suburb outside of Madrid, a widowed man named Tomas, who hadn't known joy since his wife's passing, began waking up with a song in his heart again. It wasn't because circumstances changed. His income was still limited, his body still ached, but his inner climate shifted. He stopped rehearsing sorrow and started hosting peace. His days began to feel like warm sunlight breaking through the curtains after years of darkness. In the stillness now forming around you, you are not being emptied, you're being anchored. This next season is not more warfare, it is wellness. You're not stepping onto another battlefield. You're being invited into divine balance, holy stability, and sacred rest. The war was real, yes, but peace is greater. The sorrow was deep, yes, but restoration runs deeper. And now heaven is no longer whispering, it is declaring, "Rest, beloved, the war is over. Let me give you peace." Chapter 2. The struggle for survival is ending. You, beloved chosen one, haven't you lived long enough on the cliff's edge, tiptoeing between breakthrough and burnout? Haven't you carried the weight of entire seasons with barely enough in your hands, and somehow still managed to move forward as if you weren't breaking inside? How many mornings did you rise with a question haunting your mind? Will I have enough strength, faith, provision just to make it through this day? You stretched every dollar, every moment, every drop of energy, and still poured into others. You gave when it defied logic. You planted seeds in dry ground, believing in harvests no one else could see. Wasn't it you who tithed with tears streaming down your face, whispering promises you were barely holding on to? Who lifted your hands in worship when your world lay in ruins beneath your feet? Who smiled at testimonies of others walking in abundance while you tried to find purpose in the middle of the drought? And yet, bitterness never claimed you. You remained soft in spirit, faithful in the fire. You kept saying aloud what your soul could barely whisper, "God will provide." You declared provision even when lack sat beside you at the dinner table. You praised with empty hands, but a heart full of stubborn hope. Doesn't that count for something? Your faith in famine mirrored the widow at Zarephath, who gave the prophet Elijah her last meal. 1 Kings 17:12-16. She had nothing left to offer but obedience, and it was her willingness to give out of lack that unlocked divine multiplication. Isn't that what you've been doing all along? Why did you keep giving when no one was giving to you? Why did you keep sowing when nothing was growing yet? Could it be that your spirit already knew what your eyes had not yet seen? That survival was never your destiny, only your training ground? The atmosphere around your life is shifting. The drought is breaking. The wilderness is losing its hold, just as God provided daily manna to the Israelites in the desert, but then shifted them into a land flowing with milk and honey. Exodus 3:17. So too is he now moving you from daily survival to generational abundance. What if you were never meant to live your entire life in just enough? What if God was preparing to move you into rooms of overflow where you no longer strain but simply receive? What would life look like if things started to flow, not by force, but by favor? From scraping by to stepping into surplus, it almost sounds too good to be true. But that's how favor operates. It doesn't knock politely, it floods. And the flood is coming. The world knows Oprah Winfrey as a media mogul, but she once grew up in abject poverty, wearing dresses made from potato sacks and wondering where her next meal would come from. Years later, she said, "I still have my feet on the ground, I just wear better shoes." Her story, like yours, began in scarcity, but obedience, resilience, and vision led her into overflow. And somewhere in a quiet town in Mexico, a high school janitor named Mateo had only one pair of work boots and a dream he didn't dare speak aloud. But every day he prayed over the floors he mopped. He sang hymns under his breath and thanked God for his broom. He gave extra coins to students who forgot their lunch. 10 years later, he became the school's principal, not because he demanded it, but because he lived with excellence in silence. His favor flowed without announcement. Isn't that what you've been doing? Carrying glory in quiet places. You've mastered how to stay peaceful when money was missing. You practiced generosity when support was scarce. You walked in excellence when no one applauded. You refined your spirit in the shadows, and heaven saw it all. The kind of obedience you gave, the kind that cost you comfort but never cancelled your commitment, that kind of obedience moves the heart of God. Like the butterfly emerging from its cocoon, you are about to realize that the squeezing season wasn't to punish you. It was to form your wings. The beauty of the butterfly doesn't begin at flight. It begins in the pressure. That pressure is now behind you. And now, chosen one, you are standing at the edge of a new sound, the sound of heaven releasing what earth tried to withhold. Chosen one, what you walked through was never punishment. It was preparation. The wilderness was never a sentence of suffering, but a school of strengthening. You weren't being punished when doors didn't open. You were being positioned. When God delayed what you asked for, it wasn't rejection, it was recalibration. Could it be that the version of you that cried in the wilderness is not the same one who will feast in the land of promise? Could it be that the pressure wasn't meant to destroy you, but to make sure you wouldn't self-destruct when blessings finally arrived? God has always been more concerned with your foundation than your finish line, and now the blueprint is coming into full view, because peace is not merely about the absence of conflict, it's about the presence of spiritual structure. And provision is not just currency in your account, it's capacity in your spirit. What happens if abundance arrives but your mind is still at war? What happens if tables are filled with favor, but your soul has no appetite for joy? This is why God didn't rush the process. He's not just handing you blessings, He's handing you balance. He's not just placing miracles in your hands, He's healing the internal architecture that holds those miracles. He's restoring the inner scaffolding, your mental resilience, your emotional depth, your spiritual discernment. So, the next season isn't a moment, but a movement. King Solomon asked not for riches, but for wisdom, 1 Kings 3:9-13. And because his heart posture was right, God gave him both wisdom and wealth. You too are being aligned for a dual release. No more choosing between peace and provision. No more living like wellness and wealth are on opposite teams. Now, heaven is declaring, you will have both. Have you noticed how skyscrapers take years to construct below the ground before they rise above it? Foundations that deep must support something massive. Could it be that the delays were divine proof of the magnitude of what's being built through you? The season ahead isn't just about what you'll gain, it's about how you'll carry it. And this time, you won't be stretched thin trying to hold it all together. You won't be blessed and broken at the same time. You won't have to burn your peace just to keep provision lit. Get ready to walk into boardrooms, sanctuaries, and family gatherings without calculating survival in your head. Get ready to sleep deeply without dreaming of bills and battles. Get ready to smile and mean it. Not out of pretense, but out of presence. Dame Zaha Hadid, the visionary Iraqi-British architect known for her futuristic designs, once said, There are 360 degrees, so why stick to one? She revolutionized her field by refusing to accept limitation, by creating structures that married strength with beauty. In the same way, you are entering a season of multidimensional wholeness, no longer choosing between function and favor, between peace and power. You will have all angles aligned. And in a windswept village in Kenya, a young man named Eliud spent years tending sheep with a Bible tucked in his coat pocket. He didn't preach from pulpits, he prayed in pastures. He gave what little he had to families with even less. When a regional drought wiped out half the crops, his prayers never stopped. Years later, God elevated him to oversee the entire region's agricultural redevelopment, turning deserts into gardens. His obedience had laid a foundation for provision he never imagined. Haven't you been laying that same foundation? The peace coming to you isn't temporary. The provision flowing to you isn't accidental. This isn't a one-time visitation. This is a divine establishment. Scripture says, "After you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast." 1 Peter 5:10. God isn't merely delivering you into blessing. He's rooting you in it. This is about permanence, about sustainability, about lasting goodness. Your atmosphere is shifting, not just your external conditions, your internal climate. Peace is flooding your thoughts, provision is filling your hands, and neither one is meant to replace the other. They were always meant to walk together. What would your life look like if the struggle didn't return? What would change if what God sends now actually stayed? Get ready, because this time it will last. Chapter 3. God is bringing provision without pressure. Chosen one, you've carried the burden of provision like a silent war drum in your chest. You've stood in seasons where the weight of being the provider didn't just rest on your hands, it pressed on your soul. You've strategized through exhaustion. You've set alarms before the sun broke the sky, chasing time as though it were a vanishing resource. And all the while, you bore the responsibility of others like invisible bricks on your back. Can you remember the moments you stayed up calculating bills and emotions in the same breath? Or the times you accepted roles, not because they spoke to your purpose, but because they silenced your panic? What do you do when your spirit longs for purpose, but your reality demands performance? You've worn resilience like armor and exhaustion like perfume. You took on tasks not because they reflected your identity, but because you had mouths to feed, promises to keep, and a life to sustain. And yet, in the chaos of all that hustling, you kept whispering one quiet plea to heaven: God, just give me peace in the process. And now, that whisper has been heard. What if you were never created to live in constant performance? What if God's plan was never for you to shrink into systems that suffocate your soul? The doors you once had to kick open will now swing wide with divine ease. Not because of hustle, but because of heaven's favor. Even Jesus didn't perform under pressure. When the crowds begged for signs, he often withdrew to quiet places to pray. Luke 5:16. He moved in alignment, not anxiety. And you, who carry his Spirit, are being brought into that same rhythm. God is releasing you from the grind. He is breaking the mindset that says provision must come at the cost of peace. Haven't you seen how you were manipulated into believing that burnout was holy, that hustle was the only form of faithfulness, that sacrificing your joy was the price for stability? Not anymore. The doors opening now are anointed for your alignment. You will no longer enter rooms that require you to betray yourself. You won't have to shrink your soul or starve your spirit just to be accepted. Provision is coming. But this time, without the pressure. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. Proverbs 10:22. This is the promise you're stepping into, not just blessing in your hands, but rest in your bones. Can you imagine receiving provision that doesn't drain you, but heals you? What if the opportunities coming next saw your calling before your credentials? What if the rooms you walk into welcomed your presence without demanding you earn it? The artist Jean-Michel Basquiat once said, "I don't think about art when I'm working. I try to think about life." Though unorthodox and often misunderstood, he created from instinct, not pressure. And history honored what the system tried to reject. You too are being repositioned to create, to produce, to provide, not from stress, but from flow. In a small Appalachian town, a woman named Lorraine ran a roadside diner for 17 years, never making more than enough to cover rent and payroll. She prayed while flipping pancakes, served kindness with every cup of coffee, and never charged the homeless who wandered in. One day, a food blogger driving through the mountains stopped in, posted a review, and within weeks, Lorraine's diner was a destination. She didn't chase influence. Influence found her at her post of faithfulness. Isn't that the kind of provision you've been waiting for? The kind that finds you where you are, faithful, consistent, and true. The resources now being released will match your integrity. The invitations coming will speak your spiritual language, and the financial blessings arriving will respect your emotional boundaries. You won't have to sacrifice your Sabbath for your salary. You're being reintroduced to the kingdom way, where your identity is not measured by your productivity, and your provision is not built on pressure, where rest is not a reward for burnout, but a rhythm of blessing. Picture the quiet strength of a river, not frantic, not forced, yet it carves through stone. That is how provision will move in your life now. Quiet, certain, relentless, not by grind, by grace. Listen carefully, chosen one. Heaven is speaking clearly in this hour. I can prosper you without draining you. I can elevate you without exhausting you. I can lead you into overflow without watching you disappear beneath it. This is not just encouragement. This is a divine decree over your destiny. You are not entering a season of striving. You are entering a system of sacred flow. What's coming to you isn't born from burnout. It's birthed in alignment. Can provision really come without depletion? Can you truly prosper and still protect your peace? You're about to live the answer, because divine provision doesn't strip you. It strengthens you. It doesn't rob your rest. It restores your rhythm. It doesn't make you question your worth. It confirms everything God already told you about who you are. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Isaiah 58:11. This is the promise that hovers over your name. This is the kind of provision heaven is initiating, one that replenishes as it pours, one that flows not from fear, but from favor. You're about to witness something holy. The very things that once drained you will now develop you. Tasks that once required every ounce of willpower will begin to move with grace. Not because you stopped working, but because you stopped striving in the flesh. Not because you lost your ambition, but because you finally surrendered to alignment. Have you ever wondered what would happen if peace and provision walked into the room together and didn't compete? God is about to show you that His way still works. The world will promote grind. The kingdom promotes grace. Culture screams for hustle. Heaven honors obedience. Moses didn't part the Red Sea by sheer force. He lifted his staff in obedience. Ruth didn't secure her future by striving. She aligned herself with divine timing in the field of Boaz. And you are being repositioned not by panic, but by peace. The late Cardinal Carlo Maria Martini, a Jesuit scholar and former Archbishop of Milan, once said, "Peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of God in the midst of them." He led with intellect and silence in an age of noise. And He proved that deep spiritual authority is forged not in frenzy, but in stillness. That same stillness is rising in you now. And just outside Brisbane, a man named Hugo ran a small landscaping business. For years, he struggled to keep clients. He worked long hours under the sun, rarely seeing his children. But after a season of prayer and realignment, he began to change how he worked, honoring Sabbath, refusing projects that compromised his peace. Slowly, something shifted. Clients who valued his ethic and his rest-filled model began to seek him out. Not because he toiled, but because he stood firm. Within 2 years, he was training others to run sustainable businesses rooted in boundaries and balance. Isn't that what you've been craving? A rhythm of provision that doesn't cost your soul. This next season isn't about you being stretched thinner. It's about you being filled deeper. God is not asking you to pour from your wounds. He's pouring into your healed places so that you overflow from wholeness, not brokenness. You're moving into a holy exchange, pressure for peace, burnout for balance, fear for faith. And from this divine abundance you will pour, not with fatigue clinging to your voice, not with resentment lurking behind your generosity, but with joy, with clarity, with fullness. Peace and provision were never enemies. They were always meant to walk hand in hand, and now they will. Over your life, in your home, through your calling. Because you are not a machine built to survive. You are a vessel designed to carry glory. And glory doesn't grind. Glory flows. So breathe easy. The storm has passed. The striving has ceased. Your spirit is catching its breath, not in retreat, but in rising. This is your appointed time. This is your new atmosphere. Provision with peace. Prosperity without pressure. Favor without fatigue. It is not a temporary shift. It is a new covenant, and it begins now. Chapter 4. You're being delivered from chaos. Chosen one, you've lived long enough surrounded by the sound of unrest, not just the surface-level noise of the world, but a deeper, more disorienting clamor, the echo of dysfunction reverberating in your environments. The stormy dialogues of unstable relationships, the whirlwind of emotional responsibility, and the ongoing hum of spiritual warfare that never gave you a full moment of rest. Can you remember the rooms you walked into where peace was absent until you arrived? The way your very presence brought clarity into confusion, stability into storms, order into disorder, even when you yourself were silently unraveling. Why did they always come to you? Why did everyone else seem to rest while you held their chaos together? You've been the lighthouse in others' fog, the anchor in their tempests, the safe place they ran to while siphoning the very peace you were barely preserving for yourself. And through it all, you kept showing up. Not because you had more to give, but because you refused to let the atmosphere win. But what happens when the one who holds the room together starts to come undone? What happens when the very chaos you contain begins to invade your sleep, your emotions, your health? That's where you've been, managing damage that didn't even originate from your decisions, carrying burdens that weren't yours, fighting storms that didn't belong to you, and yet you stayed, faithful, present, quiet. But now, heaven is not staying quiet. God is stepping in, not just as a comforter, but as a divine disruptor. He's not just calming the chaos, he's confronting it, not just giving you peace, but delivering you from the very systems, cycles, and spirits that keep disturbing it. Have you ever noticed how certain environments subtly made you question your sanity? How certain people created confusion and called it connection? How certain patterns tried to baptize you into their disorder? That was never holy. That was warfare. God is now severing soul ties with instability. He's unplugging you from atmospheres that masked bondage as loyalty. He's shutting the mouths of those who disguised control as care. For God is not a God of confusion but of peace. 1 Corinthians 14:33. If peace hasn't lived there, God didn't plant it. This isn't just answered prayer, this is divine rescue. The chaos you once adapted to will now agitate your spirit. Why? Because what once was tolerated is now incompatible with your elevation. You are being relocated, not just in geography, but in gravity. Your spirit is rising to new frequencies, and the static of dysfunction can't follow you there. Think of Elijah after his greatest victory on Mount Carmel. He had called down fire from heaven, yet found himself under a tree, exhausted and pursued, ready to give up. But God didn't just send strength, He changed the atmosphere. He led Elijah into a cave where the chaos finally quieted. And there, God was not in the wind, nor the earthquake, nor the fire, but in a still small voice. 1 Kings 19:12. That's what's coming to you. A holy hush that realigns everything. Have you asked yourself why the noise lasted so long? Why the battles seemed to chase you even when you weren't moving? Could it be because your very presence threatened the systems of confusion that surrounded you? British author and philosopher Alain de Botton once remarked, "The difference between hope and despair is a different way of telling stories from the same facts." For too long, people around you shaped the narrative of your life through fear and confusion. But now, God is rewriting the story, not through noise, but through nuance, through stillness, through truth. In a low-income neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, a single mother named Janelle raised 4 children while working 2 jobs. The home was small, the noise endless, fighting neighbors, unpredictable relatives, survival screaming from every corner. But one morning, she lit a candle, turned off her phone, and played soft worship music before her kids awoke. That became her new ritual, a few moments of intentional peace that began to infect the entire household. Within months, her children began joining her. Chaos didn't evaporate, but it lost its power. That sacred space grew louder than the noise around it. This is your shift. You're not being asked to manage chaos anymore. You're being delivered from it. The confusion that once felt familiar will now feel foreign. The voices that once controlled you will be silenced. The drama that used to follow you will dissolve. Not because you hid better, but because you've been elevated. Peace is not your reward for surviving. It is your requirement for thriving. Chosen one, this next move from God is intentional. He's not just bringing you into promise. He's clearing the ground before the foundation is poured. He's removing what distracts before He delivers what you've been praying for. He's decluttering the spiritual landscape because what's coming cannot dwell in disorder. Have you noticed the quiet forming around your life? The sudden separations, the inner nudges to release, the closed doors you didn't expect. That's not punishment, it's positioning. God is not simply giving you abundance. He's ensuring you're rooted in the right environment to receive it, protect it, and flourish within it. There's no sense in planting a vineyard in dry, contaminated soil, and there's no peace in sowing into spaces still tangled with confusion. You cannot carry peace and chaos in the same spiritual womb. You cannot build overflow while still clutching debris. You cannot hear heaven clearly while managing noise that was never your assignment to decode. Could that be why certain people are fading from your orbit? Could that be why spaces that once felt safe now feel suffocating? God is not asking for your permission. He is preparing your protection. Every plant that my Heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Matthew 15:13. And right now, He's uprooting dysfunction disguised as destiny. Relationships, habits, atmospheres, whatever to please, but it tries to compromise your clarity. He's confronting it, not to harm you, but to honor you. You're being repositioned for peace. So when the silence comes, don't misread it. It's not absence, it's alignment. When people exit without explanation, Don't panic. Some exits are divine escorts into your next chapter. Some losses are God's way of making room for sustainable joy. Some closures are not punishments, they're prophetic renovations. Ask yourself, what if the silence is God speaking the loudest? What if the separation you're grieving is actually the setting apart your spirit has been craving? In the Old Testament, before Nehemiah rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem, he first surveyed the ruins in silence, Nehemiah 2:13. He didn't rush into reconstruction, he moved quietly, assessing what needed to be removed before building what would last. And that's what God is doing with you. Before the divine construction begins, the cleanup is essential. Author and speaker Brené Brown once said, "You can't numb the dark without numbing the light." And for too long, you've tolerated emotional noise as a way to avoid deep spiritual surgery. But now God is turning down the volume, not to disconnect you, but to deliver you. In a quiet suburb outside Oslo, a man named Henrik lived with the noise of internal torment for decades, never feeling enough, always keeping peace at the cost of his own. After a solitary retreat into the northern woods, he journaled what he hadn't said in years. "I've been surviving people's chaos while ignoring my own soul." That trip marked a turning point. He returned not with noise but with non-negotiables, and from that moment on, peace became his practice, not just a distant prayer. That's your inheritance now. You're not just being delivered from people, you're being delivered from patterns. The pattern of saying yes when your spirit was screaming no. The habit of extending grace while denying yourself boundaries. The cycle of rescuing others while losing pieces of yourself in the process. God is not just shifting your surroundings, He's recalibrating your soul. He's extracting you from old rhythms that made chaos seem normal. Because peace is no longer a reward you get for surviving a storm. Peace is becoming your permanent address. God is saying, "I'm making peace your home now, not your vacation." No more brief visits to rest before being hurled back into confusion. No more returning to atmospheres that devalue your discernment. No more surviving messes that were never your mission. This is final. This is full. This is forever. You're not going back to the cycle. You're not returning to dysfunction. You're not picking up what God has buried. You are being delivered, mind, body, and spirit, into a new frequency where peace governs your decisions and clarity builds your direction. This is your Exodus moment. You're not just leaving Egypt. Egypt is leaving you. Chapter 5. This next blessing will come with rest. Chosen one, haven't you grown weary of fighting for every inch? Can you recall how often your victories came through sweat-soaked prayers and sleepless nights? You've known the sound of breakthrough, but also the echo of battle right behind it. Every open door seemed to have resistance waiting on the other side. And every time you climbed higher, the air got thinner, not because the altitude was too great, but because the warfare didn't cease. You never received anything easily, but you received it faithfully. Do you remember the times you worshipped while your strength was on its last breath? The moments you poured encouragement into others with a cup that had already run dry? You rose early, stayed up late, not out of passion but necessity. Not because you had the luxury of rest, but because your responsibilities didn't ask how tired you were. And yet, you praised, you gave, you obeyed, you carried honor in your exhaustion, you held reverence in your lack. You walked with quiet obedience through seasons where others would have collapsed. Have you ever wondered if anyone noticed the weight you carried in silence? Heaven did. And now, heaven is issuing a new decree over your life. The next blessing will not come through striving, but through stillness. This one won't demand your exhaustion, it will invite your rest. This one won't require your performance, it will reward your alignment. God is not just releasing provision, He is pairing it with peace. Can you imagine what it feels like to breathe again while being blessed? To step into favor without forfeiting your soul? The days of choosing between your sanity and your success, those days are ending. You've walked through too many seasons where every step forward came with inner fragmentation. You've had to choose between progress and peace, between building something meaningful and protecting your emotional well-being. But now, for the first time in what may feel like forever, God is declaring, you don't have to choose anymore. I'm giving you both. Just as Mary sat at the feet of Jesus while Martha toiled in the kitchen, Luke 10:38-42, you are being invited to stop performing and start receiving. Jesus said Mary had chosen the better part. Not because serving was wrong, but because rest in his presence was the priority. That's your new position now. Stillness that attracts blessing. This blessing will not chase you down while you're running. It will wait in the place where you finally slow down. It will not interrupt your exhaustion. It will inhabit your restoration. Why is God doing it this way? Because he's not just giving you something. He's healing something. He's correcting the inner agreement that said blessing must be painful. That favor must be hard-won. That rest is a reward rather than a right. He's restoring the rhythm of Eden, where provision and peace walked hand in hand in the cool of the day. World-renowned sleep scientist and author Dr. Matthew Walker once said, "Sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health." It's no coincidence that even in biology, restoration is linked to rest. Your soul was never created to thrive under constant motion. And now, God is moving in agreement with what your body and spirit have always known, that healing comes with stillness. In a small village tucked into the hills of Portugal, a seamstress named Luz lived with quiet dignity. She never had much, but she prayed over every piece of fabric she stitched. One morning, after a particularly painful year, she felt prompted to stop sewing, just for a week. She obeyed. In that rest, ideas came. New designs flowed. Within a year, her hand-stitched garments were sold in boutique shops across Europe. Her rest didn't delay her blessing. It delivered it. Isn't that the rhythm you've longed for? This is the turning point, not just in your circumstances, but in your relationship with work, with progress, with blessing itself. You're stepping into a divine rhythm where rest and reward are not enemies. They're companions. Just like the waves withdraw before they return with force, your recent stillness is not stagnation. It's set up. The blessing that's coming next isn't a storm. It's a tide of goodness designed to meet you right where you are as you finally exhale. Chosen one, this isn't the kind of provision that drains you to the last drop. This isn't breakthrough that breaks you down. What's coming next is holy, and holy things lift. Holy provision multiplies your joy. It doesn't leave you exhausted on the other side of answered prayer. It fills you and frees you. God has seen the years where you've lived in survival mode, where your shoulders carried more than any human could bear, and your nervous system never truly knew how to settle. He saw you sleeping with tension, loving with caution, giving with fear. And he's saying now, that cycle ends here. This next move is not being born out of pressure, it's being born out of promise. You're stepping into a divine exhale. Breath is coming back into your being. Not shallow, frantic gasps for survival, but deep, full, soul-level rest. The kind that lets you breathe easier, sleep deeper, love stronger. Not because your circumstances are perfect, but because your posture has shifted. Have you noticed how hard it's been to laugh lately? How difficult it's been to enjoy what you've prayed for because you've still been looking over your shoulder, anticipating the next disruption? God is cutting that cord. You're not going to love from lack anymore. You're not going to give from empty places. You've earned your rest, not just rest from work, but rest from worry, rest from over-explaining, rest from the emotional gymnastics of trying to hold everything together in silence. And now rest is coming to every layer of you. Spiritual rest, emotional rest, financial rest, relational rest. The storm that stretched you is losing its grip. The pressure that bent you is being replaced by peace that will anchor you. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. You heard that scripture before, but now you're going to live it. This rest is not theoretical, it's tangible, it's timely, it's tailor-made for your soul. You won't need to explain why you're not moving at a frantic pace anymore. You won't have to defend your peace or your slower rhythm. Your fruit will speak for you. Your results will carry your voice into rooms where you never even had to audition. And you won't need to beg to keep what heaven gave you. What's divinely sent can't be stolen, sabotaged, or shamed away. God's seal is on this blessing, the same way he sealed Noah's ark before the flood, Genesis 7:16. He's sealing your provision, not just to protect what's coming, but to preserve your peace while it grows. This next blessing is not another test. It's a testament. It won't wear you out. It will build you, carry you, refresh you. It will remind you that God has been orchestrating all of this in the background while you were holding the line in faith. He never forgot you. He's been setting the table in the presence of all that tried to drain you. He's been clearing the thorns from your path. And he's been waiting, not for you to fight again, but for you to finally rest and receive. Can you accept that now? Can you embrace a chapter that doesn't begin with warfare, but with wonder? Renowned chef and humanitarian José Andrés once said, "You cannot feed the soul if you're always in a rush." His commitment to feeding the hungry has always been rooted in presence, in stillness, in pausing long enough to nourish others deeply. Likewise, your next season is not a sprint, it's a sanctuary. In the hills of British Columbia, a young woman named Camilla had been working 3 jobs to support her siblings. For 5 years, she knew only movement, no margin. But one night, after collapsing from exhaustion, she felt God whisper, "Trust me." She left one job, then another. Doors began opening that didn't require striving. A grant she never applied for, a connection she didn't pursue. Rest was no longer a risk. It became the release. That's your story now. Peace and provision were never meant to be rivals in your life. They've always been destined to walk together, hand in hand, across your days, through your work, into your home, and across your calling. And now they will. Get ready, chosen one, because this time you will be blessed and rested at the same time, not running, not panicking, not proving, just receiving. Chapter 6. You will be a safe place for others. Chosen one, not a single moment of your pain was pointless. Nothing you survived was wasted. Every storm that tried to drown you, every betrayal that attempted to unravel your trust, every silent tear that soaked your pillow in the darkness, all of it was part of the divine shaping of your soul. What you thought was merely endurance was actually divine construction. God was never just getting you through the fire, he was making you fireproof. Not just patching up your wounds, but reconfiguring you into a healer. Not just protecting you from chaos, but forming in you the antidote to it. Haven't you noticed how your spirit can now sense turbulence before it erupts? How your presence calms atmospheres others find unbearable? You've walked through environments that triggered everything in you. Spaces where you couldn't exhale fully. Rooms where your spirit had to armor itself just to function. But even in those trenches, God was doing something more than rescuing you. He was refining you. Why do you think you've become so sensitive to pain, to tension, to the subtle cries of others? Because you've known what it feels like to be unsafe in your own story. And now that deep knowing is becoming a sanctuary for others. Because you've known chaos, you will carry calm. Because you've tasted lack, you will give without holding back. Because you've been immersed in warfare, your words will release peace. Because you've known the sting of rejection, your eyes will extend welcome. And because you've lived in instability, you will become a spiritual foundation others lean on in secret storms. This is no longer just about your healing, it's about your hosting. You are becoming a living temple, a vessel of divine presence. Not a monument to perfection, but a breathing reminder that God dwells in surrendered souls. He comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. 2 Corinthians 1:4. What once broke you now equips you. The very compassion that flows from your silence is not manufactured, it's prophetic. You won't just tell your story, you will radiate it. People will feel it in your presence before you ever speak. Like a lantern in a dark valley, your glow won't shout, but it will guide. And broken spirits will breathe again just by being near you. Because the oil you carry came from crushing. In the book of Acts, when Peter's shadow began to heal the sick, Acts 5:15, it wasn't his charisma that carried power, it was his consecration. He had been broken, forgiven, and reborn. That same power is quietly forming in you. It's not flashy, but it's holy, not loud, but lasting. What if everything you went through wasn't just survival training, but sanctuary preparation? Holocaust survivor and author Elie Wiesel once said, "There is divine beauty in learning. To learn means to accept the postulate that life did not begin at my birth. Others have been here before me, and I walk in their footsteps." Your pain has educated your spirit, and now you become a living refuge, not by reciting theology, but by embodying it. In a quiet cafe in Florence, a man named Raphael sits every Thursday at the same corner table. He doesn't say much, but locals often sit near him. They say there's something about his stillness that steadies them. What no one knows is that Raphael lost his entire family in an earthquake a decade ago. He doesn't minister with words, he ministers with presence. His silence carries stories, his breath carries peace. That's what your life is becoming. Not a platform, but a presence. Not just a testimony, but a transmission. You're not being raised to flex success. You're being raised to host safety. In a culture saturated with noise, your calm will be sacred. In a society obsessed with appearances, your authenticity will be disruptive. In a generation chasing clout, you will carry Christ, and that chosen one will change everything. Chosen one, you're no longer just a person moving through time. You are becoming a walking sanctuary, a living altar, a divine encounter cloaked in human form. There is something weighty and sacred being carried in your footsteps now. People will sit beside you and feel something they don't have language for, and it won't be you they're sensing. It will be the presence of God flowing through you, hovering around you, speaking from within you. You are becoming someone's holy interruption. Your provision will be more than personal. It will become public nourishment for those who've been starving in spirit. Your peace will act as a balm on battle-worn souls, reminding them that stillness is still possible. Your joy will spread like sunlight cracking through long winters. Your wisdom, carved through pain and shaped by prayer, will unlock prison doors in people's minds that no therapy, lecture, or life hack ever could. Can you feel it now? The shift from merely surviving to sheltering others? The very safety you once begged God to give you, the comfort you cried for at midnight, the refuge you sought in empty rooms, is now radiating from you. What once was your prayer request has become your prophetic identity. You are no longer just healed. You are healing. You are no longer just restored. You are restoring. You are not just at peace. You're carrying peace like a divine aroma that lingers long after you leave the room. And here's the part that will make your spirit leap. You will not be known by your old wounds, not the betrayal, not the abandonment, not the breakdown. You will be known by your fruit. You will recognize them by their fruits. Matthew 7:16. And your fruit will be unmistakable. The fruit of surrender, the fruit of sacred perseverance, the fruit of staying when you could have fled, of holding on when no one applauded, of letting God sculpt your soul in silence. No longer will your identity be tied to your survival story. It will be revealed through the atmosphere you carry. The trauma that once echoed through your body is being replaced by truth that echoes through your presence. People will walk away from time with you feeling lighter, clearer, more whole, and they won't always understand why. But heaven will. Heaven knows what you carry. Do you understand what that means? You're not simply entering a new season. You're being renamed in the Spirit. You're not just the one who made it. You're the one now making room for others to heal, to cry, to be honest, to come undone in safety and rise again in truth. In the Old Testament, cities of refuge were established for those running from destruction. Numbers 35:11. You are becoming that kind of spiritual city, a refuge, not because you have it all together, but because you've been put back together by the hand of God Himself. Former NBA champion and philanthropist Meta Sandiford Artest, formerly Ron Artest, once said after a life-altering moment of healing, "I didn't know peace until I stepped away from trying to prove something. Then I finally found who I was." His story, once marred by chaos, became a vessel of peace for countless youth. So it will be with you. What once defined you will become someone else's lifeline. And in the outskirts of Madrid, a former addict named Soraya now runs a women's center out of a former bakery. She never shares her full testimony. She doesn't need to. The moment women walk into the room, tears fall without words. It's not just the coffee or the kindness, it's her spirit. It has become safe. You are that now, a holy presence in human form, a vessel that heaven can trust. And the beauty is this: you're not trying to be impressive, you're simply becoming available. The same peace and provision God poured into you is now flowing outward as mentorship, comfort, clarity, hospitality, healing, prophetic counsel, presence. Your life is becoming undeniable evidence that God heals, God restores, and yes, God still makes people whole. So get ready, chosen one. The sanctuary He built inside of you in secret is about to shelter others in public. Chapter 7. This is the answer to the prayers you forgot you prayed. Chosen one, pause for just a moment. Breathe in slowly. Let your spirit settle. Something sacred is happening beneath the surface of your life, and it's time you recognize the magnitude of it. What you're stepping into isn't random. What's unfolding around you isn't coincidence. This is not luck. This is heaven responding. This is divine memory in motion, answering not only the prayers you shouted in desperation, but the ones you whispered in broken surrender, even the ones you forgot you ever prayed. Can you remember those trembling moments on your knees when words failed but tears spoke volumes? When your hand shook too hard to hold the Bible, but your soul still reached for God? When you kept the cries quiet so no one else would hear you unravel? Heaven heard every soundless scream. God saw it all. He recorded it. He stored it. Nothing slipped past Him. Every ache, every unspoken plea, every time you whispered, "Help," beneath your breath, it echoed into eternity. Even the prayers you forgot you prayed have not been forgotten by the one who holds your timeline. Could it be that the days you thought were falling apart were actually days when your spirit was sowing? You didn't even realize it. You believed you were breaking, but in the invisible realm, seeds were being planted. Not seeds of eloquence, but seeds of raw obedience, seeds of surrender, seeds of resilience. seeds of trust that kept growing in the dark. Those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. Psalm 126 verse 5. That wasn't poetic exaggeration, it was prophetic law. Remember when you said, "God, I can't do this without you." That moment was memorialized in heaven. Or when you declared, "I don't want riches, I just want peace." God wrote it down. And when you admitted, "I'm tired, but I still trust you," angels rejoiced, because faith wrapped in fatigue is the most precious offering of all. Heaven's memory is not like earth's. God doesn't archive prayers in a dusty drawer. He engraves them into his plans. I have seen your tears, I have heard your prayer. 2 Kings 20 verse 5. That was his word to Hezekiah. And it's his word to you now. You see, the kingdom never forgets what was spoken in pain but sealed in faith. God's memory is holy, and within that memory exists the full architecture of your unfolding. Not just the milestones, but the midnight cries. Not just your declarations, but your doubts. Not just your worship, but your weariness. All of it has been accounted for in the design of what is now beginning to take shape. Look again. Can't you feel the air shifting? The atmosphere is being rearranged in your favor. Opportunities are aligning behind the scenes, quietly, steadily, not because you campaigned for them, but because you qualified through faithfulness. You qualified through consistency when no one applauded, through surrender when no one validated you, through spiritual maturity that was forged in loneliness. What if what's coming now isn't the result of asking louder, but of obeying longer? Real estate mogul and philanthropist Mohed Altrad, once a Syrian orphan, built his empire not by force, but by discipline. He once said, sometimes the smallest sacrifices made quietly lead to the biggest openings. You made those sacrifices in silence, without spotlight, and now the gates are opening. In the hills of South Korea, a woman named Mina tended a hidden prayer garden for 12 years. No followers, no platform, just intercession. One day, a missionary stumbled upon the garden and asked to film it. That footage opened doors to fund ministries around the world. Mina had forgotten most of the things she asked God for, but God hadn't. Her silence had never gone unnoticed. Yours hasn't either. And now here's the miracle. This next season will not be tainted by the same warfare that marked the last. You've wrestled enough. You've bled enough. You've cried enough. You've fought to protect your peace. Now you'll inhabit it. You struggled to survive. Now you'll thrive. You wandered through fogs of confusion. Now clarity will cover you like warm oil poured gently from heaven's hand. Not because you chased it, but because you grew into it. Chosen one, this is what it truly means to be restored. Not merely to be blessed, but to be made whole. Not just to receive something outwardly, but to feel complete within. Restoration is deeper than replacement. It's healing on a soul level. It's the quiet confirmation that the pain had purpose, that the process had precision, and that heaven was always paying attention. God is not just answering the one prayer you cried in desperation. He's responding to the layers of longing you didn't even realize were prayers. Prayers like, Lord, if you just give me one chance, I'll use it wisely. God, if you heal me, I'll never go back. Father, I don't want a platform. I want purpose. You didn't say those things to impress anyone. You said them in stillness, in surrender, in sacred solitude. You whispered them into tear-soaked pillows, mouthed them in traffic, thought them in silence while sitting alone in crowded rooms. And now those surrendered words are blooming, not with spectacle, but with substance, because the kind of blessing coming now doesn't scream, it doesn't rush, it doesn't arrive with flashing lights or public fanfare. It enters quietly, clothed in peace. It finds you not while you're striving, but while you're still. This isn't a performance-driven miracle. It's a whisper-fulfilled promise. Can you feel it? The gentleness of what's coming. It's being ushered in by angels who know exactly what you need. Not more commotion, not more pressure. You need rest. You need a restoration that doesn't ask for anything in return. And that's exactly what's arriving. Not because you demanded it, but because heaven has always remembered who you truly are. You were never forgotten, never abandoned, never behind. You weren't disqualified. You were being divinely positioned for this hour, for a moment when peace and provision would walk into your life side by side, hand in hand, finally and fully. Do you understand what this means? You will no longer have to choose between purpose and prosperity. You will no longer have to trade your peace of mind for a paycheck. You won't have to tear yourself in half to prove your worth to anyone, because your next season isn't about striving. It's about receiving what was always written into your story. God is not a man. He doesn't bless partially. He doesn't reward halfway. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights. James 1:17. He blesses fully, eternally, purposefully. And now, chosen one, you're about to feel what it's like to be at peace, not just with the present, but with your past. No more replaying regrets, no more dragging shame like luggage from an old season. You're being released, forgiven, realigned. You're not just about to receive divine provision, you're about to inhabit it. It won't require chasing, it won't require compromise. It will arrive like dew on the morning grass, faithful, gentle, sufficient. The world told you your tears were weakness, but heaven called them investments. The world said your silence was failure, but God called it faithfulness, and now the returns are being released. This is more than reward. This is confirmation that nothing was wasted, that your delays were divine, that your faith was never ignored, that your pain had a purpose. Famed cellist Yo-Yo Ma once said, "Passion is your joy. It is the essence of who you are. You have to unwrap it, find it, and use it." But what he didn't say is that sometimes passion is discovered only after pain. You've been unwrapped by fire, but what's left is pure and powerful. And in a sunlit street in Bogota, a teacher named Lorena used to wonder if anyone saw her late nights grading papers in the dark. Her salary barely enough to sustain her, her prayers often unanswered. But one day, the child of a former student, now a university graduate, returned and placed a scholarship fund in her name. Her decades of sowing weren't forgotten. They simply matured in silence. And so have yours. This is your harvest moment, but not the noisy kind. The kind that slides in gently, settles deeply, and never leaves. Chosen one, get ready. You're not just going to see God's goodness, you're going to become living proof of it. A story that says, yes, God heals. Yes, God provides. Yes, God restores completely. Chosen one, this is your divine fulfillment. Moment, pause with me for a moment. Breathe. Feel the weight of what heaven has just revealed to your spirit. This wasn't just a series of words, it was a sacred unveiling. You've walked through 7 chapters of truth, not just as a listener, but as one who was divinely called to hear this message at this exact time. You have moved from drought into overflow, from warfare into rest, from questions into clarity. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is what happens when heaven remembers. God didn't just hear your prayers, He kept them. He didn't just watch your journey, He orchestrated it. And now, you're stepping into a moment where peace and provision are no longer separated. They are arriving at the same time, for the same person, you. You're no longer just someone who needs a miracle. You are becoming living proof that God still performs them. You've been refined. You've been rebuilt. You've been redefined, not by the pain, but by His presence. And now, God is not just blessing you for your sake. He's raising you up as a safe place, a testimony, a vessel of healing and light for others. Now, if this message has spoken to your spirit, if you felt confirmation, clarity, or even just the quiet comfort of knowing you're not alone, I invite you to respond. Press the like button as an act of agreement with what heaven is doing in your life. Share this message with someone who needs hope, who's been praying in silence and waiting for their own moment of confirmation. And comment below, what part of this prophetic journey moved you the most? Which chapter felt like it was written just for you? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications. We are building a space where the chosen ones are seen, fed, and reminded of what God is doing right now. And you belong here. To those who supported this message through super thanks, thank you. But even if all you did was listen quietly in the background, I want you to know, your presence matters. You are not forgotten. Your time is valuable. And I believe with all my heart that what you gave, whether in attention, emotion, or generosity, will return to you in the form of favor, peace, and divine surprises. This community is not about numbers. It's about alignment. And if you're still here, that means you're aligned. So now, I bless you. I speak rest into your heart, strength into your soul, and clarity into your steps. I declare that you will no longer just carry faith, you will carry fulfillment. That peace will no longer visit your life temporarily. It will dwell with you daily. That the provision you're about to receive will not require striving, only alignment. That you will feel whole, not in spite of what you've walked through, but because of how heaven used it. I pray that the rest of this year will not be heavy. It will be holy, that you will no longer chase anything. What's yours will recognize you and arrive on time, that the pain you carried was not in vain. It was prophetic investment. You are seen, you are remembered, you are chosen. Amen. Chosen one. Have you been feeling it too? That unshakable sense that you're being watched, not by man, but by heaven. That quiet stirring in your spirit, like something sacred is drawing closer. Have you noticed how the noise of this world has started to lose its grip on your heart? How time feels like it's folding in strange ways? How places that once fit now feel foreign? These aren't just feelings, they're signals. You didn't find this message found you. Written across timelines, it arrives right on schedule for your spirit. And here's the question heaven's been waiting for you to ask. What if you're not going to die the way others do? What if, like Enoch, you were never meant to finish like the rest? What if your exit from this world won't be through death, but through divine retrieval? This is not just a video, it's a prophetic unveiling, a spiritual briefing for those who have been walking so closely with God that the veil between realms is starting to thin. You felt invisible to people, but deeply known by heaven. You've walked faithfully in silence while the world overlooked you. You've been misjudged, misunderstood, misnamed, but still you walked on. Why? Because your path is not about applause, it's about assignment. You're being prepared not to collapse, but to ascend. And before we go deeper, I want to pause and say thank you. Truly, thank you to every one of you who's been supporting this divine assignment. Whether through your words, your presence, your prayers, or your super thanks, your faithfulness matters. Even if no one on earth sees what you've sown, heaven does. And I see you. I honor you. You are part of this movement. Now, if your spirit bears witness to what you're reading, if something inside you just whispered, "This is me," type 777 in the comments right now. That number isn't random. It's a declaration, a signal, a code. It says, I am walking with God. I am walking like Enoch. I am not living for survival. I am ready for the shift. I am on divine assignment until the moment heaven calls me home. So let's be clear. This isn't just an encouraging word. This is divine strategy. This is your spiritual blueprint for the days to come. Watch it again when your spirit feels shaken. Share it with the ones you know have also been hidden, marked, and called, because what's about to be revealed will shift the way you understand your purpose and your exit. You won't die the way they expect. You won't leave the way the world predicts. Like Enoch, when the time is right and the assignment is fulfilled, you'll be taken. Let's begin. God's chosen ones. Like Enoch, you won't die, you'll be taken. You were never called to blend in. You were chosen to walk beyond the timeline, not just to escape mediocrity, but to transcend the constructs that others believe are fixed. You were not designed to simply survive the patterns of this world. You were built to shift atmospheres and interrupt time-bound narratives with the pulse of eternity. The world calls it obscurity, but heaven calls it resonance. You are not just another name in a crowd. You are a divine appointment wrapped in skin, walking a path whose coordinates were drawn before you took your first breath. Enoch's story may only occupy a few verses in Genesis, but the frequency of his life still echoes in the spirit realm today. While others in his lineage lived for centuries, Methuselah, Jared, Lamech, their records read like biological footnotes, generations marked by time, length, and ancestry, but rarely by intimacy. But Enoch's biography was brief in word, but boundless in weight. His legacy defied measurement because it wasn't written in years, but in intimacy. The word says, Enoch walked faithfully with God, then he was no more, because God took him. Genesis 5:24. That one sentence holds more authority than 1,000 accolades. It carries the thunder of eternal weight. He didn't build kingdoms, amass armies, or leave behind dynasties. He left something more eternal: resonance. His entire life became a signal heaven could not ignore. He didn't need to impress people when he had already moved God. Have you ever wondered why God didn't wait for Enoch to grow older, richer, or more publicly impactful before taking him? Why was his life marked by ascension, not accumulation? Why his name was sealed in eternal memory, not because of what he achieved, but because of how deeply he aligned? Why his record wasn't written in accomplishment, but in presence? You see, in the divine architecture of purpose, time is not the main structure. Intimacy is. Heaven does not measure as men do. The calendar cannot weigh what only covenant reveals. Heaven measures by spiritual frequency, not human achievement. Enoch didn't just live, he vibrated at the frequency of God's breath. His steps weren't random, they were calibrated like the rotation of stars, governed by unseen mathematical harmony. His walk wasn't reactionary, it was resonant. And when a life begins to echo heaven more than earth, something inevitable happens. The earth must let go. You've likely been told that legacy is built by doing more, grinding harder, lasting longer. But what if the most potent legacies were born not in performance, but in proximity? What if we've been climbing ladders God never asked us to build? God has always inverted the blueprint. He doesn't require quantity, he desires quality. Quality of faith, of obedience, of surrender. What if your hidden prayers and private sacrifices are more significant than public stages? What if your quiet yes holds more cosmic weight than another's thunderous performance? What if the things you thought disqualified you, your tears in secret, your unseen sacrifices, your soft refusals, were actually your promotion papers being signed in heaven? Enoch's life was so attuned that earth could no longer hold him. It wasn't death, it was divine transfer. It wasn't escape, it was completion. The resonance of his obedience had reached such frequency that gravity could no longer bind him. His walk became a ladder, his breath became agreement, and heaven said, "Now." Pope Gregory the Great once wrote, "To desire nothing outside of God is already to dwell in heaven." That was Enoch. He didn't die to be in heaven, he walked himself into it. And that is the call over your life. You were never meant to measure yourself by earthly time. Your design is heavenly, and your measurements are eternal. You weren't born for countdowns. You were born for convergence. You carry a spiritual algorithm in your bones, one calibrated not to clocks, but to covenants. But can I ask you, what if your current obscurity is the disguise for a divine acceleration? What if your hidden obedience is rewriting timelines in the spirit? What if every unseen surrender is constructing a ladder of light that heaven will one day use to pull you higher? What if the silence you're in now is not the absence of impact, but the womb of your next realm? Take Maya, a woman who spent her entire life behind hospital curtains, not as a patient, but as a janitor. She prayed in every room she cleaned. She never made headlines. She never stood behind a pulpit. But when she passed, several doctors testified they felt peace only when she'd been in the room. They didn't know it, but her walk was shifting atmospheres. Her intercession was shifting blood pressure. Her presence was changing prognosis. Her promotion didn't come with applause. It came with angelic applause. The records on earth missed her, but heaven celebrated her like royalty. That's what resonance looks like. In contrast, take Charles Ponzi, yes, the man whose name now defines a system of deception, a charismatic financier in the early 1900s. Ponzi promised impossible returns and fooled thousands. He walked not with God, but with greed. His rise was fast, but his fall was ruinous. Convicted, imprisoned, forgotten. His life was long enough to build a name, but too shallow to carry eternal weight. Fame was his fortress, but character was absent from his foundation, and so everything crumbled. You, chosen one, were never meant to impress crowds. You were meant to echo the cadence of heaven. You are not on stage to be seen. You are in sync to be significant. And when you do, you'll begin to feel the laws of spiritual gravity shifting. Have you noticed the disconnections lately? The pull to silence, the strange desire to walk alone, the craving for less noise and more stillness. It's not isolation, it's insulation. You're not breaking down, you're being built different. God is preparing to carry you where distraction cannot follow. Have you seen the snow leopard? It walks alone through the Himalayas, almost invisible, yet unmatched in precision. Its paws make no sound, but its impact is seismic to the ecosystem. It moves silently, but its absence disrupts balance. Like you, it's not loud, but it's marked. Not flashy, but it's feared by predators. It's a creature of mystery, not mythology. You were never supposed to roar to be respected. You were created to move with mystery. Heaven designed your walk to be low profile, but high impact. Enoch's taking is not a fairy tale. It is a prophecy encoded in your own spiritual DNA. You carry an internal clock set to divine alignment, not earthly expiration. You are not bound by metrics. You are moving by mission. There will be a moment, perhaps not announced, perhaps not even understood by those around you, where heaven declares, "This one is ready." And the realm you thought was your ceiling will split open, and what once held you will release you, not out of death, but out of delight. It will not feel like an ending. It will feel like recognition. Can the world explain it? Number, but can the spirit recognize it? Absolutely. Spirit calls to spirit. Deep calls to deep. And what heaven has marked, no man can deny. There's no algorithm for obedience, no trend chart for presence. But when God sees that walk, he responds. So don't despise the obscurity. Don't delay your walk, waiting for validation. Don't edit your surrender to fit their expectations. Your yes is building an invisible staircase, one that angels can descend and ascend on. Your surrender is tuning your spirit to a wavelength higher than logic, a frequency clearer than applause. Every time you chose integrity over influence, you took another step. Every time you chose consecration over convenience, you rose again. You are not stalling, you are ascending. And one day, like Enoch, it will happen, a shift, a silence, a supernatural transition, not staged, not scheduled, just sacred. You won't die, you'll be taken, not because you lost, but because you finished. And it will not be punishment, it will be proof that heaven remembers those who walk faithfully. Your walk has not been a waste, it has been a countdown. So walk on, chosen one. Walk with courage, walk with clarity, walk without needing applause, because you're not just walking toward destiny, you are walking it into being. The closer you walk with the divine, the more you begin to realize you were never made to stay. You were not designed for spiritual stagnation or earthly permanence. Your existence has always been tethered to another realm. And the further you go in your walk, the more evident it becomes that your truest home isn't here, it's there. You're not just passing through time, you're growing through realms. The landscape of your soul is shifting, stretching beyond the limitations of culture, noise, and flesh. This is what Enoch's story reveals. His departure wasn't an interruption. It wasn't a glitch in the narrative or a tragic anomaly. It was a continuation, a seamless extension of a faithful walk that transcended dimensions. He didn't vanish, he ascended. The Genesis record whispers, Enoch walked faithfully with God, then he was no more, because God took him. Genesis 5:24. But that taking wasn't random. It was relational. It wasn't the result of religious performance or public spectacle. It was the result of prolonged intimacy. Enoch didn't merely step out of life, he stepped into where he'd always belonged. The border between heaven and earth blurred, not because Enoch forced it, but because his consistency with God eroded the barrier over time, like a shoreline quietly giving way to an ever-rising tide of glory. Have you ever wondered why the deeper your faith grows, the more detached you feel from the noise of the world? Why the lights dim in places that once fascinated you, and the applause that used to stir you now feels hollow? That quiet ache within your spirit, that gentle pull towards stillness while everything around you screams for performance. It's not fatigue, it's not apathy, it's not regression, it's frequency shift. You've begun to tune out the static of this world because you're picking up the higher resonance of eternity. You're no longer living by reactions, you're moving by revelation. Not everyone can hear it, but you can. Because when heaven begins to pull, even the familiar begins to lose its grip. The more Enoch walked with God, the less gravity the world had on him. And this is precisely what's happening to you. Your soul is shedding its old weights. You're no longer nourished by applause. You're no longer satisfied by surface. The rooms that once impressed you now seem small. Conversations that once thrilled you now leave you hollow. Opportunities that once excited you now feel misaligned. Is it sadness? Number, it's sacred homesickness. A divine restlessness. A longing not for escapism, but for return. Your spirit isn't deteriorating, it's maturing. You're outgrowing shallowness, and heaven is becoming your appetite. Psychologists speak of existential longing, a deep awareness that life must hold more than what we can touch or explain. But for the chosen ones, it's not just theory, it's experience, it's cellular, it's in your breath. You've glimpsed eternity's color, and now the world feels grayscale. Your eyes have adjusted to glory, and now the lights of this world feel dim in comparison. And when heaven starts to feel like home, it changes the way you move here. Your decisions, your posture, your preferences. everything starts to shift. You no longer live for moments. You live from mission. Have you noticed how your spiritual hunger intensifies even while your social circles shrink? How the more you feel aligned with God, the less tolerance you have for superficiality. Take Saint Teresa of Avila's words. The closer one approaches to God, the simpler one becomes. This isn't regression, it's refinement. Complexity falls away, crowds thin out, even laughter starts carrying layers of lament. You begin to discern what others deny. You begin to grieve what others glorify. It's not depression, it's discernment. It's the price of being awake. You're learning to live between two worlds, and your appetite is adjusting to food that only heaven can prepare. And while some around you chase relevance, you crave reverence. While they build platforms, you're building altars. While they curate presence, you're cultivating presence. There is a quiet authority forming in you, a gravitational pull that doesn't draw attention to you, but draws others toward the spirit that's hosting you. Take the story of Father Thomas, a contemplative monk who lived in the Swiss Alps. He spent 40 years in silence and prayer. No social media, no followers, but world leaders quietly made pilgrimages to him for guidance. His walk with God wasn't loud, but it was legendary. He was not branded, but he was branded by heaven. His death wasn't mourned with drama, but the moment he passed, many in the village reported hearing bells ringing with no one pulling the ropes. Some things are unexplainable on earth because they're echoes from heaven. For here we do not have an enduring city, but we are looking for the city that is to come. Hebrews 13:14. And then there's the other side, those who mock what they cannot understand. One prominent example is Aleister Crowley, the self-proclaimed occultist and great beast of the early 20th century. He openly defied spiritual truths, mocked scripture, and encouraged indulgence over integrity. His end? Isolated, paranoid, addicted, and consumed by darkness. His fame never saved him. His influence never comforted him. Earth celebrated him, but eternity recoiled. What looks like power in the temporal realm often collapses in the weight of eternal consequence. You, on the other hand, carry something weightless, yet immeasurable. You walk like a whisper through rooms, yet the spirit realm makes way when you enter. Why? Because heaven is building a sanctuary inside you. God is not just visiting. You are becoming a dwelling place. Your body is becoming a tabernacle. Your soul, a tuning fork. You are not just preparing for glory. You are already housing it. A woman named Elira worked as a midwife in a remote region for decades. She delivered over 4,000 babies, many of whom grew up never knowing her name. But she prayed over each child she held. She never asked to be remembered, she asked to be useful. And when she passed away, a rainbow arched over her cabin for 3 hours. Local elders said they'd never seen anything like it. Earth didn't notice, but heaven threw a celebration. Because the walk that goes unseen by man often gets the loudest welcome in glory. What if the transformation you're experiencing now is actually the preparation for a realm your feet have not yet touched? What if the tension you feel isn't punishment, but propulsion? What if the longing is actually an internal GPS redirecting you to where you were always meant to be? What is happening in your life may confuse those who need external metrics. But you aren't building a resume, you're building resonance. Your soul is anchoring in eternity. Your decisions are being filtered through a lens no algorithm can calculate. Your discernment is not a flaw, it's evidence that your frequency is shifting. And yes, it will feel lonely, but so does every summit. Air is thinner where few dare to climb. A caterpillar doesn't mourn its cocoon. It submits to the stillness. It embraces the dark. It dies to the form it knew. And when the wings form, flight becomes inevitable. That's your process. Stillness is not stagnation. It's preparation. You're not disappearing. You're transforming. The world may not see it, but heaven does. The Spirit does. And the atmosphere around you is already adjusting in recognition. So if people say you've changed, they're right. If they say you're distant, they're correct. If they accuse you of being too deep, don't fight it. Shallow waters never disturbed you anyway. You've tasted living water. You've heard eternity's melody. You've touched frequencies that no human words can articulate. There's a term in astrophysics called event horizon, the boundary beyond which nothing can return. That's what's forming around your soul. You are nearing the point where your spiritual gravity bends the very reality around you. You're approaching the edge of where earth ends and glory begins. Our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ. Philippians 3:20. So walk on. Don't resist the quiet. Don't panic when laughter fades into longing. Don't grieve what you're shedding. Celebrate what you're hosting. When heaven starts to feel like home, you don't need to be afraid of being taken. You understand it's not an ending. It's a reunion. You're not being pulled away. You're being welcomed back. You're not being erased. You're being remembered. Keep walking, chosen one. You are closer than you've ever been. Every tear has been counted. Every whisper recorded. Every step an act of worship. And one day, like Enoch, it will happen. A shift, a silence, a supernatural transition. You won't die. You'll be taken. And it will not be punishment. It will be proof that heaven remembers those who walk faithfully. So, walk on, chosen one. Walk on. You're walking home. You weren't sent here to settle. You were deployed with purpose. From the moment your spirit was released into this realm, you carried orders that didn't come from culture. They came from the King. Heaven didn't send you here to blend in. You were sent to shift atmospheres, disrupt patterns, and illuminate what darkness thought it had concealed. That's why you've never felt fully at home in the places others build roots. Because you were never meant to root yourself in fading soil. You were meant to release seeds of eternity. Your feet may touch the ground, but your blueprints were drawn in heaven. You've tried to convince yourself at times that you could stay where it felt safe, where the applause was loudest, where the patterns were predictable. But each time, something within you started to wither. Why? Because safety is not the same as sanctification, and applause is not the same as assignment. You were not made for stagnancy. You were designed for divine movement. That's why certain environments began to feel too tight. Why once comfortable routines began to feel like cages. Why relationships you once clung to began to feel like distractions. What you didn't realize at first was this. Your discomfort wasn't a failure. It was a frequency shift. You were being tuned to something eternal, and the more you tune in, the less this world fits you. Have you ever noticed how the louder the world gets, the quieter your soul becomes? This is not an accident. It's alignment. You weren't created to attach. You were commissioned to act. And like Enoch, your mission was never about permanence in this realm. It was about obedience to a realm that never fades. While others labor to be remembered by history, you are called to be recognized by eternity. The resonance of your life is not measured in followers or fame, but in frequency, heaven's frequency. Enoch didn't spend his days chasing the validation of men. He didn't waste energy trying to turn dirt into divinity. Instead, he focused his whole being on one thing, walking with God. And in that sacred rhythm, eternity began to respond. His disappearance was not disappearance at all. It was divine convergence. Earth didn't lose him. Heaven fulfilled him. So what about you, chosen one? Are you anchoring your sense of identity to things God only meant to pass through? Have you settled in territories that were supposed to be temporary? You were not sent here to build castles in the sand. You were sent to plant eternity in the hearts of men. You weren't commissioned to build empires that crumble. You were called to carry light that multiplies. His story reminds you, you weren't sent here to collect applause. You were sent here to release light. And once that realization saturates your soul, everything changes. Your posture shifts. You no longer cry over closed doors. You discern them as divine boundaries. You stop idolizing invitations from man and start interceding for instructions from God. You lose interest in being seen and grow hungry to be sent. Why does your spirit push back against the very things others seem addicted to? Because you weren't called to conform, you were called to consecrate. You weren't wired for popularity, you were built for purity. You weren't called to fit in, you were chosen to infiltrate. That's why shallow conversations exhaust you. That's why pointless cycles drain you. That's why what once thrilled you now feels like a distraction. God has set your spirit apart. This is why that fire inside you won't let you settle. It's why your prayers are deeper, your worship weightier, your silence is longer. Your consecration is not a punishment, it's a promotion. Ask yourself honestly, have I confused comfort with calling? There's a world that shouts, build your brand, but the Spirit still whispers, build the altar. And altars are not pretty, they're not marketable, they're not glamorous, but they are sacred. They hold fire, blood, surrender, and divine exchange. And when you live from that place, every movement becomes holy. You no longer beg for relevance, you move with reverence. Dietrich Bonhoeffer understood this. He left the safety of American comfort to return to Nazi-occupied Germany, not for applause, not for optics, for obedience, and that obedience cost him his life, but it built a legacy that still shifts nations. Now compare that to Joseph Goebbels, a man who sold his soul to illusion. He clung to power that was rotting. He poured his life into a propaganda machine that devoured him from the inside out. His end? A bunker filled with fear, delusion, and death. Why do some ascend while others implode? Because one walked with eternity in view, the other danced with the darkness. And you, chosen one, you were born to walk through this world like fire through dry grass, to carry presence so weighty that demons recognize your name even when people do not. No one serving as a soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs, but rather tries to please his commanding officer. 2 Timothy 2:4. Your movement doesn't always make sense to others, but it doesn't have to. You're not living by their calendar, you're living by his command. You may feel delayed, but you're actually being deployed. The pauses in your life are not setbacks. They are strategic intermissions, divine moments of recalibration where God adjusts your vision before the next elevation. Elijah didn't build platforms, he built altars. He didn't chase fans, he chased fire. And when his mission was complete, heaven didn't whisper retirement. It thundered with glory, a chariot of fire, a whirlwind, a divine transfer. What if your obedience in this obscure season is building chariots in the spirit? The monarch butterfly doesn't migrate for attention. It moves because of internal code, divine programming. No maps, no external approval, just a knowing. And you've felt that too, haven't you? That inner pull to release what once served you. That ache to move towards something you can't yet name. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. Luke 16:10. What happens if you grip what God already told you to let go of? This is why you're more sensitive now. Why laughter is laced with longing. Why busyness makes your soul tired. Because God is shielding your sensitivity. He's tuning your antenna. You're not distant, you're dialed in. So don't be shaken when they say, you've changed. Yes, you have. You're not chasing platforms, you're hosting presence. You're not curating a lifestyle, you're consecrating a life. The excess is being trimmed. The noise is being silenced. The furniture is being cleared from the battlefield. Why would a soldier decorate a foxhole? This isn't a season for decorating. It's a season for discerning. This is why your joy is quieter, but heavier. Why your tears come quicker, but with purpose. Why your solitude is sacred, not sad. You're no longer moved by applause. You're anchored by assignment. And when the time is right, not when man celebrates, but when heaven confirms, you will be taken higher. That could mean spiritual elevation. That could mean a geographic shift, or it could mean a final homecoming. Whatever it is, it will not be random, it will be righteous. So stay light. Don't attach your destiny to a job title. Don't chain your identity to someone's opinion. Don't marry what God only meant to mentor you. You were not built to settle, you were born to release. You weren't called to blend in. You were chosen to stand out. Your legacy will not be measured in what you acquired, but in what you allowed God to release through you. And when the day comes, when the final step is taken and the last yes has been whispered, God will turn the page himself, just like he did for Enoch, and the story will not end. It will just begin again, in glory. You may feel buried, but you're actually being built. What feels like a grave may, in fact, be a greenhouse. The darkness around you is not death, it's design. You've mistaken the silence for absence, but heaven has never stopped speaking. The pressure you feel is not punishment, it's precision. Because when God is building something eternal, he doesn't rush it, and he certainly doesn't broadcast it. He buries it deep, surrounds it in mystery, and lets it grow where no one else can touch it. Enoch didn't wear a crown, write a psalm, or lead a nation. He never stood on a mountain like Moses, never called fire from heaven like Elijah. His name was not lifted on banners, nor did he speak to thousands. But his legacy reaches into eternity. Why? Because God hides those he trusts the most. He doesn't parade his most potent weapons, he prepares them. Not all glory is public, not all impact is loud. Some of heaven's most powerful voices are formed in complete silence. Have you ever noticed how the most sacred shifts in your life came not with applause, but with tears and quiet surrender? Scripture gives Enoch only a few verses, but those verses carry the weight of entire volumes. His story doesn't shout about signs, wonders, or revival campaigns. It speaks only this: Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him. Genesis 5:24. That was enough. Not because it was flashy, but because it was fully aligned. Not because the world approved, but because heaven affirmed. You too have been walking through territories that no one claps for. You've labored in obscurity, sowed in tears, interceded in rooms with no audience. And still, heaven has recorded every step. You've wrestled with the ache of being unseen. You've whispered prayers no one will ever quote. But what if what you mistook for rejection was actually redirection? What if what you called delay was divine development? What if your hiding wasn't a punishment, but a prophetic positioning? When something is truly valuable, it doesn't live on the surface. Gold is hidden in the earth. Diamonds are forged in darkness. Pearls are birthed in shells, sealed shut by pressure. Even oil, the sacred symbol of God's anointing, must be crushed out of the hidden olive. Could it be that your season of hiding has always been about your holiness? That the low places weren't detours, but divine wombs? Why do you think God kept certain opportunities from you, even when you were so ready to shine? Because heaven knows what we forget. Exposure without preparation destroys what was meant to live. Visibility too soon creates spectacle, not sanctification. Fame without formation builds charisma, but no character. And so God, in his mercy, covers what he's cultivating. He hides what he's healing. Enoch didn't clamor for attention. He didn't rush his assignment. He didn't build a platform. He just walked quietly, consistently, faithfully. And heaven called that pleasing. A violin doesn't sing in symphonies until it has spent months in silence. Its strings must be tuned, its body shaped by skilled hands. If rushed, it cracks under pressure. That's you. You've been under tension, not because you're broken, but because you're being tuned. Not because you're unworthy, but because you're being made worthy to carry the weight of what's coming. Have you ever asked why silence has been your companion for so long? Look to Corrie ten Boom, a quiet Dutch watchmaker's daughter who hid Jewish families during the Holocaust. She wasn't famous when she forgave the Nazis. She wasn't visible when she risked her life to save others. But in the hidden, she burned with unshakable fire. And when God finally revealed her, her story didn't just inspire, it delivered generations. Her years in obscurity weren't wasted. They were sacred. She didn't emerge because of strategy. She was unveiled because of surrender. Now contrast that with cult leader Jim Jones, a man obsessed with his own image, demanding loyalty, rejecting accountability. He filled rooms with noise but carried no weight. His ministry wasn't hidden, it was inflated. And when the storm came, it collapsed under its own deception. He wasn't covered by God. He was exposed by pride. Not all platforms are divine. Some are traps disguised as stages. Why do you think God silenced your name when others were going viral? Because he was guarding you, not from failure, but from contamination. He's been keeping your oil pure, your name off flyers, your voice out of rooms not yet ready for your frequency. He's been wrapping your identity in layers of trust. Because your calling is generational, your anointing is costly, and your presence can't afford to be diluted by noise. You are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance. Psalm 32, verse 7. There's something profoundly sacred about being unseen. In those hours, you don't perform, you pray. You don't chase, you discern. You don't manipulate outcomes, you cultivate obedience. Every time you've chosen the secret place over the spotlight, every time you've surrendered your timing to his timing, you've been marked. You've asked God, why is my story taking so long? But what if slow is sacred? The sequoia tree, one of Earth's mightiest beings, spends decades rooting deep before ever reaching the sky. Why? Because what's going to carry weight must first carry depth. You are not behind. You are being built for endurance. You are not stuck. You are being structured for legacy. You're not carrying a moment. You're carrying blueprints. What if your maturity isn't just about your breakthrough, but about someone else's? Have you ever heard of Maribel? Most haven't. She was a hospice nurse in São Paulo. For 27 years she worked night shifts, sitting beside the dying. She prayed over them. She sang their favorite hymns. She comforted their families. No social media, no biography. But when she died, people from across nations came to honor her. She never asked to be seen, but heaven saw her. Earth may have missed her name, but heaven shouted it. Enoch wasn't loud, but he was legendary. He heard whispers that thundered in the spirit. He walked in harmony with the divine until the lines between dimensions blurred. And when he matched heaven's rhythm, God didn't delay. He took him, not as an exit, but as a testimony. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Psalm 91:1. So what if your invisibility isn't punishment, but proof that God trusts you with silence? He hides prophets, intercessors, and kingdom carriers in places where applause can't reach and distractions can't infect. Why? Because what he's building through you can't afford shortcuts. Your message is not microwave. It's marinated. It's been crushed, consecrated, and confirmed. That's why this next move won't come with fanfare. It'll come with fire. Are you grieving the quiet place when it's actually your place of greatest strength? The doors that didn't open were not denials. They were divine shields. The people who walked away weren't losses. They were part of your pruning. The platforms that didn't come weren't withheld. They were postponed until your oil was ready. Chosen one, you are not hidden to be forgotten. You are hidden to be fortified. When God unveils you, It will not be for entertainment. It will be for eternal impact. You won't rise with confusion. You'll rise with clarity. And when that moment arrives, it will not feel like a beginning. It will feel like a continuation of every private yes you whispered in the dark. So if you're still hidden, stay rooted, stay obedient, stay sharp, because the longer God hides you, the louder He plans to use you. You've been disappearing, haven't you? Not physically, but spiritually, quietly, unapologetically, from the noise, the expectations, the artificial validation cycles. You didn't ghost them, you outgrew them. You didn't lose interest, you found higher purpose. And now, much like Enoch, you're no longer walking to be seen, you're walking to be sealed. When Enoch vanished, the Bible offers no parade, no press release, just this: he was not, for God took him. Genesis 5:24. One moment he was among them, the next he was absorbed into glory. No warning, no approval, just a holy extraction. That kind of intimacy can't be scheduled. It can only be cultivated. And when your walk gets that close, when your spirit becomes synchronized with the pulse of heaven, you become harder to track on earthly frequencies. Have you been noticing that even those closest to you no longer understand your rhythm? You've stopped defending your absence. You've stopped explaining your silence. The world reads it as distance, but in the realm of the spirit, it's depth. You're not abandoning connection. You're responding to a higher communion. You don't crave visibility. You crave clarity. Your heart isn't becoming colder. It's becoming consecrated. The world doesn't understand holy withdrawal. Carnal minds can't decode covenant movement. Why aren't you chasing the spotlight? Why aren't you commenting back? Why are your responses fewer, your gaze steadier, your appetite simpler? It's because God is tuning your attention to eternal things. You've been summoned, and the world can't interpret what God hasn't disclosed. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God. They are discerned only through the Spirit. 1 Corinthians 2:14. Like a submarine disappearing beneath the surface, the deeper you go, the less noise you make. In fact, heaven often cloaks those it calls most deeply. Your life has begun to slide off earthly radars because your assignment has crossed into sacred territory. Is it strange how old pleasures now feel heavy? How what once entertained you now feels spiritually corrosive? You've started slipping out of reach, not out of arrogance, but out of obedience. You've sensed a new gravity pulling you down, not into despair, but into devotion. The same parties now feel hollow. The same gossip drains your energy. The same audiences that once applauded you now feel irrelevant. Why? Because heaven is building in you what the world was never meant to validate. Take Simone Weil, a French philosopher and mystic. She walked away from academic prestige, fame, and recognition to spend her days laboring with poor factory workers. She said, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." Her life became invisible to the world, yet deeply known by heaven. She didn't vanish into irrelevance. She ascended into resonance. Now contrast her with Elizabeth Bathory, the infamous Hungarian countess obsessed with vanity and reputation. Terrified of aging, obsessed with power, she clung to youth in monstrous ways, leading to a legacy of horror. Her hunger for control consumed her. She died hidden. Yes, but hidden in shame, not in sanctification. So what kind of hiding is shaping you right now? A man named Derek, once an ambitious startup CEO, began to feel numb even in success. One day, he sold everything and became a school janitor in a neighborhood he once ignored. For the next 20 years, he prayed over every locker, mentored fatherless kids, and paid secret tuition fees. When asked why, he simply said, "God asked me to walk a hallway no one noticed." And that hallway became holy ground. There's a concept in neuroscience called neural pruning. Your brain eliminates connections it no longer uses, so stronger ones can form. That's what's happening to you. God is severing mental and emotional ties to systems that no longer serve your calling. You're not detached, you're being pruned for power, and yes, you'll confuse some people. They'll ask, "Where have you been?" But the truth is, they're trying to trace a movement that's not on their map. You've been walking with God in places only obedience can lead. You're not less present, you're more positioned. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. Colossians 3:2-3. Don't be surprised when you feel invisible. Don't resist when God calls you to the wilderness. That's where prophets are forged. That's where mantles are measured. That's where assignments are affirmed without applause. Why are you explaining silence to those who don't hear your frequency? Let them wonder. Let them speculate. When the time is right, when God pulls back the veil, when the full blueprint unfolds, they'll remember your disappearing act. They'll ask how you knew, where you went, why you shifted. And your answer will be simple. I was walking. Walking with a voice they didn't hear. Walking into timing they couldn't interpret. Walking away from shadows toward unshakable light. So stop apologizing. Stop justifying. You are not running. You're rising. You are not disappearing into obscurity. You're being hidden into holiness. Chosen one, your retreat is not your resignation. It is your recalibration. Your vanishing is not weakness. It is warfare. Your silence is not absence. It is strategy. You're not done. You're being deployed. And when the time comes, when God unwraps what He's been shaping in solitude, it won't be for attention. It will be for impact. Until then, let the distance speak louder than any defense. Walk on, and let the world wonder where you went. You didn't miss your moment. Your exit is being orchestrated. Enoch didn't disappear by accident. He wasn't snatched prematurely. His exit wasn't random. It was a divine strategy executed with supernatural precision. He was not, for God took him. Genesis 5:24. No alarms, no applause, no press release. Just pure alignment. His assignment concluded, and so did his earthly tenure. And now, chosen one, you are being drawn into that same cadence. Have you noticed that certain doors are closing, not because you're failing, but because you've fulfilled? You sense it. The air is changing. The invitations are different. The rooms you once fought to enter now feel foreign. Conversations that used to light your fire now feel like noise. God isn't punishing you. He's promoting you. But promotion in the kingdom often feels like subtraction before multiplication. This is what happens when your timeline shifts from natural to supernatural, when you stop tracking success by metrics and start discerning progress by movement in the Spirit. This is what alignment feels like. It's not always loud, but it is always unmistakable. You are not being evicted, you are being escorted. Your exit is not chaos, it is choreography. God is closing access to what once held your focus, not to deprive you, but to deliver you. Every holy ending is an echo of a new beginning. But here's the thing, the world often labels your exit as failure because they weren't in the room when God issued your release. So why are you still waiting for people to understand what heaven has already approved? When God determines your departure, whether from a role, a relationship, a city, or even a lifetime, He doesn't ask for human permission. He moves, and when He moves, He doesn't explain, because revelation is for the obedient, not the opinionated. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delighteth in His way. Psalm 37:23. And when your steps are ordered, so are your stops, so are your shifts, so are your exits. Enoch didn't broadcast a farewell tour. He didn't host a Going Higher live stream. He simply walked, until walking with God became walking into God. And when heaven said, "Enough has been fulfilled," he transitioned without struggle. Chosen one, you're entering that realm now, not necessarily through death, but through divine redirection, through holy closures, through endings that don't need applause to be anointed. The people around you may not comprehend your shift, but they don't carry your spirit. They haven't walked your steps. They don't hear the whisper you're obeying. Why are you afraid of leaving what no longer feeds you? In nature, the most essential shifts happen without sound. A glacier splits under tension. A seed breaks open beneath soil. A caterpillar dies in darkness before rising with wings. And you are in metamorphosis. Your spirit is not dying. It's molting, shedding timelines, identities, relationships, and atmospheres that were only meant to get you this far. You are not breaking down. You are breaking through. God has been weaning you off of attention-based value systems. He's detoxing you from applause addiction. He's severing soul ties with old seasons so you can enter new realms clean. You may feel like you're losing traction, but you're actually gaining revelation. There is weight in your walk now. Heaven is trusting you with strategic silence. And yes, people will misunderstand it. They'll call you distant, detached, too deep, but they didn't hear the whisper that changed your direction. They didn't see the vision God gave you in the secret place. Have you noticed how few people ask about your assignment, but many question your exit? You're not obligated to answer them. Some shifts are sacred. Some blueprints are confidential until construction is complete. The world wants access to your purpose without surrendering to your process. Take Dr. Miles Monroe. For years he spoke prophetically about completing one's assignment and dying empty. When he passed suddenly in 2014, it stunned the public, but not those who listened to him closely. He had prepared for that moment spiritually. His exit was not random, it was right on schedule. Now contrast that with Jeffrey Epstein, a man who built his life on deception, manipulation, and perversion. His exit was shrouded in scandal, confusion, and spiritual darkness. He tried to control every outcome, but couldn't escape divine consequence. Fame cannot protect what is misaligned with God. The difference? One man's departure was strategy, the other's was collapse. And then there's Mrs. Harlan, a retired schoolteacher from Detroit, quiet, unknown, faithful. She mentored teen mothers, paid for groceries without telling anyone, and prayed over students by name. When she passed, over 400 people showed up at her memorial. She left no public platform, but she exited with eternal impact. So I ask you, what kind of exit are you preparing for? There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to keep and a time to throw away. Ecclesiastes 3:1-6. Some of you are not leaving failure. You're leaving fulfillment. You are not quitting. You are concluding. You're not confused. You're being called higher. God is rerouting you into assignments that require all of you, purified, processed, and fully present. That's why distractions are being severed. Why certain spaces feel stale. Why even some connections you loved now feel spiritually incompatible. So why are you shrinking your obedience to preserve someone else's comfort? Like a spacecraft detaching from its launch pad, your separation is essential for elevation. What helped you rise may not be able to travel with you where you're going. You must be willing to let go of the booster to reach orbit. In astrophysics, this principle is called staging. Without it, the rocket can't reach the next atmosphere. The extra weight becomes drag. Similarly, every spiritual stage requires a new shedding. That's why you feel heavy when you ignore heaven's prompt to release. And it's why your silence is strategic. Every time you obey God without broadcasting it, every time you leave a room without explaining, every time you close a door without a dramatic speech, you multiply your authority in the unseen realm. Even your absence begins to carry prophetic weight. Your transitions will preach louder than your platforms. So stop asking for confirmation when God has already given you clearance. You don't need to announce what heaven is already accelerating. The same God who called Enoch into glory is now calling you into divine repositioning. You're not fading, you're focusing. You're not vanishing, you're vibrating at a higher frequency, and those not tuned in will say you disappeared. Let them. They'll say, "Why did you leave? What happened to them?" They used to be so involved. And your answer won't need to be lengthy. Just this: I was walking, and God shifted my path. Have you ever noticed that the deeper your alignment grows, the less your calendar belongs to people? You don't move by pressure anymore. You move by presence. Your yes is sacred. Your time is tithed. Your attention is costly. You don't live for appointments. You live by assignment. This next exit, it's not about leaving people behind. It's about walking forward into places they're not equipped to follow. And that's not arrogance. It's accuracy. Chosen one, some exits are spiritual tectonic shifts. They rearrange your inner geography. They shake everything familiar. But afterward, they reveal new land, new vision, new inheritance. So why are you resisting what's trying to release you? The enemy would love for you to fear transition. He wants you to mourn what was meant to graduate you. But he can't stop what heaven has already signed. He can try to delay it. He can try to confuse it. But divine timing is not managed by demons. It's managed by decree. You are on the verge of release, into new territories, into fresh authority, into hidden mandates that have been waiting for your obedience to mature. And when it happens, it won't feel like a break. It will feel like a breaking open. So, don't be afraid when your schedule clears, when your inbox dries up, when invitations slow down. That's not rejection, that's reservation for a realm where heaven is your host. You are not leaving because it fell apart. You are leaving because God finished building it through you. So let the people speculate. Let the rooms adjust to your absence. Let the noise quiet. You're not ghosting. You're going. You're not exiting to escape. You're exiting because the cloud is moving and your spirit is following. Your exit is not man's decision. It's heaven's design. And when the assignment is done, when every line of your spiritual blueprint has been lived, not just read, then, and only then, the elevation will manifest. So walk on, quietly, boldly, obediently, and let your exit prophesy. There's something sacred about a steady walk. Not sprinting, not striving, not performing, just walking, faithfully, quietly, intentionally, with your eyes fixed on the one who sees in secret. That's what Enoch mastered, and that's what you, chosen one, are being summoned into. He didn't rush toward legacy. He didn't chase visibility. He didn't demand recognition. He simply walked, and that walk became a womb for something supernatural. Enoch walked faithfully with God, then he was no more, because God took him. Genesis 5:24. No death, no delay, no drama, just divine transition. And that is your blueprint. Have you ever felt like you were walking through life unnoticed? That no one sees the sacrifice, no one hears the prayers, no one applauds the purity, that your journey feels too slow, too obscure, too ordinary to mean something cosmic? But heaven sees it differently. You see, in the realm of eternity, obedience creates echoes. And with every quiet step you take in the right direction, your spirit is gaining velocity, even if the world calls it stillness. Enoch's walk wasn't random, it was rhythm, a steady cadence of intimacy that gradually aligned him so fully with the realm of the spirit that earth could no longer contain him. That's what this is about, not a destination, but a transformation. You don't walk for the sake of motion, you walk for the sake of becoming. So why do you keep measuring progress by what you see, when what matters most is what you're becoming? Even when it feels like nothing's moving on the outside, everything could be shifting on the inside. God isn't watching your pace. He's watching your posture, your heart, your motives, the purity of your surrender. And while the world teaches you to run for results, heaven invites you to walk for relationship. Every yes to God in private is creating momentum in the spirit. Every no to temptation, every act of forgiveness, every time you choose to believe when it would be easier to give up, you are walking, and your walk is counting more than you know. Have you ever considered that the path you're on is already shifting nations, even if no one's seen the first ripple yet? Sometimes the weight of your legacy isn't felt until after you're gone, but that doesn't mean it isn't building right now. Heaven builds backward. The outcome may manifest later, but the authority is being deposited now. Take Henrietta Lacks, an African-American woman whose cancer cells were taken without consent in the 1950s. She never walked a platform, never preached a sermon, but her cells, known as the Heller line, became the foundation for countless scientific breakthroughs, vaccines, cloning, genetics. She didn't live to see her impact, but her walk, her lived experience, became an anchor for generations. That's legacy. That's transfer. And that is what your walk is setting in motion. You were never called to impress the world. You were called to please God. And when your walk pleases Him, a holy countdown begins. The countdown is not based on metrics or milestones. It's not based on whether people clap. It's based on when the alignment reaches a frequency so holy, so precise, that God says, "Now is the time." They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. Isaiah 40:31. So walk until the weariness lifts. Walk until the weight becomes wings. Walk until what felt like delay begins to look like design. This walk is not a career plan. It's a covenant path. It's how God develops your authority, not just your assignment. And the longer you walk, the more heaven presses into you what earth can't teach. Some days it will feel thankless. Other days you'll want to give up. But walk anyway. Have you ever wondered why you're still standing after everything? Because there's something inside you that refuses to stop. That's not personality. That's divine breath. That's spiritual stubbornness. That's the evidence that your spirit is from another realm. Like a tectonic plate shifting deep beneath the crust of the earth, your consistency is building pressure, and eventually there will be a break, an opening, a release, a transfer, not a breakdown, but a breakthrough. The world may not see the shift coming, but you will sense it before it appears. You'll notice a sudden lightness in the spirit, a soft whisper in the atmosphere, an unexpected calm in your soul, and then, without announcement, heaven will call you up. Your reward won't be a stage. It will be a seal, a supernatural validation that your private faithfulness has reached its divine conclusion. Not all transfer looks like death. Some of it looks like elevation. Some of it looks like reappointment. And some of it, like Enoch's, looks like complete departure from one realm into another. Jacqueline, a former social worker in New Zealand, used to spend her days counseling at-risk teens. No one saw her stay up late, writing personalized letters to every one of her clients when they left the system. She prayed over each one. Years later, one of those teens, now a government leader, sought her out and said, "I'm leading with your words in my heart." She never sought platform, but her walk was prophetic, and her influence will outlive her. Have you ever asked what seeds your walk is planting that you may never live to harvest? Now compare that with Charles Ponzi, a man obsessed with fast legacy, fame, control. His financial schemes made headlines, but his fall was just as dramatic. He walked for attention, not assignment, and when the weight of exposure hit, he collapsed under a kingdom of lies. That's why God invites you into the long walk, not the loud walk, not the instant walk, the eternal one. You're walking not just for impact, but for intimacy. You don't need to rush. You just need to remain. When your walk is real, your transition is automatic. So why are you trying to manifest what only heaven can release? This isn't about manifestation, it's about maturity. You're not here to manipulate destiny, you're here to embody it. And when the fullness of time arrives, you won't need to announce it. Heaven will mark it, and earth will respond. The walk is forming your spiritual lungs, so you can breathe in new altitudes without suffocating. It's strengthening your spiritual joints, so you can carry the weight of glory without buckling. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians 1:6. That's why the walk can't stop now. Not when you're this close. Walk until the cycles break. Walk until your prayers become prophecies fulfilled. Walk until your children feel the fire you left behind. Walk until the scroll in heaven flips to the next chapter and God says, "Now." Your walk is building a sound in heaven, a vibration that hell can't replicate, a frequency that only heaven recognizes. So when you feel unseen, misunderstood, misinterpreted, walk anyway. When people ask where you've been and why you've changed, walk anyway. When doors close and friends disappear and invitations vanish, walk anyway. Because the walk isn't for them, it's for Him. This isn't just about where you're going, it's about who you're becoming along the way. God isn't impressed by how far you go. He's drawn to how deep you're willing to walk. And when the time comes, like Enoch, you won't need a funeral to mark your exit. You'll need only one word from heaven. Come. Come because you finished it. Come because you kept the flame burning. Come because you stayed on the path when everyone else turned back. Come because your walk has made room for your transformation. You didn't sprint. You didn't perform. You didn't build towers of pride. You walked. And that walk, measured in moments of obedience, silence, sacrifice, prayer, pain, and purity, has been tracking heaven's timeline. So don't quit in this final stretch. The scrolls are almost unsealed. The mantle is almost released. The shift is almost here. Walk until the transfer happens. And when it does, you won't just exit. You'll be exalted. So remember this, chosen one. You were not called to fade. You were called to ascend. You weren't designed to merely survive the chaos of this world. You were formed to walk so closely with God that even death itself cannot interrupt the conversation between your soul and heaven. Like Enoch, your story is not one that ends in a grave. It's a story of transcendence, of being taken, not just in the future, but even now. From fear into faith, from noise into knowing, from survival into surrender. Every step you take with God is a step away from limitation and a step toward divine elevation. You are walking toward something eternal, something sacred. And one day, when the time is right, you won't die. You'll be taken. And if this message spoke to the deepest places in your soul, if it reminded you of who you really are, I invite you now. Comment 777 as a public declaration that you're walking with heaven, not the world. That your eyes are on eternity, not just survival. To everyone who's been supporting this channel, whether through a simple like, a comment, a share, or a generous super thanks, please know this. Your support isn't just seen, it's felt deeply. It's what keeps this sacred space alive for those who are still searching for light in the dark. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, turn on the bell so you never miss a moment of divine revelation, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their walk matters more than their resume. And now, may the God who walked with Enoch walk with you. May every step you take be saturated with favor, with fire, and with clarity. May angels accompany you. May the heavens back you, and may your path shine brighter until the day you're taken. Not just from this earth, but into glory, legacy, and divine fulfillment. You are not behind. You are on schedule. You are not forgotten. You are hand-picked, and your walk is not wasted. It's witnessed by heaven itself. Bless you, beloved. You're walking toward the eternal. Don't stop now.